My son put me in a retirement home, so I decided to do this with our $1 million inheritance. Walter Johnson held the stacks of cash with trembling hands, watching the flames dance in the living room fireplace that had been his refuge for 40 years. The smell of burning wood mixed with the musty scent that had begun to take over the house, abandoned for 3 months. Every $100 bill in his hands represented decades of hard work, sacrifices, and dreams he had built, with his family's future in mind. The decision of Michael, his only son, still echoed in his mind like a hammer pounding relentlessly. 2 weeks ago, as he signed the retirement home papers against his will, Walter had promised himself he wouldn't let that betrayal go unnoticed. What Michael didn't know was that his father had kept a considerable amount of money at home, far from the banks and the eyes of his ambitious son. 47 years working as a bricklayer, Walter murmured to the crackling flames before him. I built this house brick by brick, saved every penny thinking my son would take care of me in my old age. The sound of footsteps on the porch interrupted his thoughts. It was Margaret, his 72-year-old neighbor, who had been his confidant during these difficult months. She knocked lightly on the door before entering, as she always had since Michael had taken the house keys away. Walter, my dear, you shouldn't be here, Margaret said, closing the door behind her. If Michael finds out you left the retirement home. To hell with Michael, Walter replied, not taking his eyes off the money. He thought he could lock me up in that place and then come back here to take everything I built, but he didn't know I had this money hidden. Margaret approached slowly, eyeing the staggering amount of bills spread across the coffee table. Her eyes widened when she realized the magnitude of the sum. My God, Walter, how much money is this? $350,000, he answered, methodically counting each stack. All my retirement savings from the last 5 years, plus the sale of that upstate property Michael didn't even know I owned. I kept it all here at home because I always suspected he'd try to control me through money one day. Margaret sat beside him, worried about her friend's emotional state. She had known Walter for over 2 decades and had never seen him so determined yet so wounded. And what do you plan to do with all this money? I'm going to burn it, Walter said, grabbing a stack and moving it toward the flames. If Michael wants to treat me like a burden, then he'll inherit exactly that. Nothing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Margaret gripped Walter's wrist firmly before he could toss the money into the fire. Wait a minute, my old friend. I know you're hurt, and rightfully so, but doing this won't solve anything. You'll regret it. Later. I won't regret a thing, Walter shot back, trying to pull free from her grasp. I worked my whole life to leave something for my son. I bought this house, paid for his college, helped him when he started his own business. And how does he repay me? By locking me in a retirement home so he can sell my house without me getting in the way. But Michael said it was temporary, that you needed medical care. Lies, Walter shouted, abruptly standing from the armchair. I heard him talking to the realtor on the phone. He's already selling the house. Said I'd never come back here because I have Alzheimer's. But that's a lie, Margaret. I know exactly what's happening. Margaret remained silent for a few moments, processing her friend's words. She knew Walter was lucid, and that his suspicions about Michael had merit. Over the past few months, she had noticed how his son only visited when he needed to borrow money. Even so, burning the money isn't the solution, she insisted. There's a better way to make things right. What way? Asked Walter, sitting back down. Michael has control over my life now. He managed to have me declared incompetent with the help of a doctor who never properly examined me. I can't even leave the retirement home without his permission. You got out today because I bribed the security guard with $200, Walter admitted. And I only have until 6 in the evening to return, or they'll call Michael. Margaret glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 2:15 p.m. Then we have less than 4 hours to find a better solution, she said, grabbing her purse. Let's talk to Dr. Matthews. He's known you for years and can confirm. You're perfectly lucid. I already tried that, Walter sighed. Dr. Matthews said he can't do anything because Michael already has legal guardianship. He said I'd need a lawyer. But what lawyer would believe an old man stuck in a retirement home? My niece's lawyer, Dr. William Peterson. He specializes in family law and has handled similar cases. Margaret suggested. I can call him right now. Walter shook his head. I don't have money for an expensive lawyer, Margaret. This money here is all I have left, and if Michael finds out where it is, he'll get a court order to take it all. Then let's hide the money somewhere else, she proposed. At my house, for example. And if you get in trouble because of it? No, Margaret, I won't drag you into this. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Walter rushed to the window and saw Michael's silver Camry parking on the curb. His heart raced when he realized his son wasn't alone. There was a man in a suit beside him. It's Michael, Walter murmured, stepping back from the window. And he brought someone with him. Margaret quickly gathered all the stacks, dove cash and stuffed them into a grocery bag she'd left on the table. Hide this under your bed, quick, she said, pushing the bag into Walter's hands. I'll talk to them here in the living room. Walter hurried to the bedroom, hearing Michael's footsteps on the porch. He shoved the bag under the bed and returned to the living room just seconds before Michael unlocked the door. Dad? Michael said, surprised to find Walter at home. What are you doing here? The retirement home called saying you'd disappeared. Michael appeared to be in his mid-40s, with dark hair just starting to grey at the temples. He wore a blue dress shirt and black dress pants, always careful to maintain a professional appearance for his real estate clients. His brown eyes carried a poorly concealed irritation. This is still my house, Walter replied, trying to stay calm. I can come here whenever I want. No, Dad, you can't, Michael retorted, stepping inside, followed by the man in the suit. This is Dr. Robert Anderson, the psychiatrist from the retirement home. He's here to evaluate your mental state after your escape. Dr. Anderson was a thin man around 50, with small glasses and a stern expression. He carried a black briefcase and studied Walter with a clinical gaze that made the old man uneasy. Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson, the psychiatrist said, stepping closer. I need to ask you a few questions about what prompted you to leave the retirement home without authorization. I didn't escape, Walter countered. I just came to my home. Dad, you need to understand you can't live alone anymore, Michael interjected. Just yesterday you forgot to take your medication and got confused at dinner. I didn't forget anything, Walter protested, and I wasn't confused. I just didn't want to eat that awful food they serve there. Dr. Robert Anderson jotted something in his notepad. Mr. Johnson, do you remember how you got here today? By taxi, of course, Walter replied. I paid $17 for the ride. Where did you get the money for the taxi? Michael asked, suspicion in his voice. Walter hesitated for a moment, realizing his mistake. If Michael found out he had money at the retirement home, he'd start digging for answers. Margaret lent it to me, he lied, glancing at his neighbor for support. That's right, Margaret confirmed quickly. I was visiting Walter this morning. When he said he wanted to come here to pick up some clothes, I gave him the money for the taxi. Michael didn't seem convinced, but said nothing. Dr. Anderson continued asking questions about time and place, all of which Walter answered correctly. Do you understand why you're at the retirement home? The psychiatrist asked. Because my son wants me out of the way so he can sell my house, Walter retorted, bitterness creeping into his voice. Dad, that's not true, Michael said, sounding genuinely hurt. You were having episodes of confusion, forgetting to lock the house, leaving the stove on. It wasn't safe for you to live alone. Lies, Walter shouted. I've never left the stove on in my life. And about locking the house, it only happened once because I was distracted thinking about your mother. It would have been her birthday that day. Mom passed away 5 years ago, Dad, Michael said gently. It wasn't her birthday. Walter fell silent for a moment, confused. He had indeed gotten the date wrong, but that didn't mean he was losing his mind. Anyone can mix. Updates, he muttered. Dr. Anderson closed his notepad. Mr. Johnson, based on today's conversation, I believe your father is oriented and lucid. However, leaving the retirement home without authorization shows impulsivity and poor judgment about his own limits. What does that mean? Margaret asked. It means we'll need to increase security at the home, the psychiatrist replied, and possibly consider anxiety medication. I don't want medication, Walter protested. I'm not anxious, I'm furious. There's a difference. Dad, you need to cooperate with your treatment, Michael said. It's for your own good. My own good would be staying in my own house, sleeping in my own bed, tending to my garden, Walter shot back. Dr. Anderson checked his watch. We should head back to the home, Mr. Johnson. It's past time for your afternoon snack. I'm not a child to have snack time, Walter grumbled, but moved toward the door. Before leaving, he took one last look at the room where he'd shared so many happy moments with his wife, and where just hours ago he'd considered burning his entire fortune. The money was still hidden under the bed, but how long could he keep it a secret? Margaret, thank you for your company, he said, hugging his neighbor. I'll visit you tomorrow, she whispered in his ear, and we'll talk about that matter. Michael walked Walter to Dr. Anderson's car, watching closely as his father interacted with the neighbor. Something about the situation felt off, but he couldn't pinpoint what. During the drive back to the retirement home, Walter sat silently, in the back seat, watching familiar streets pass by the window. Every block that took him farther from his house felt like a small death, another piece of his identity left behind. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Anderson began. Walter, looking through the rearview mirror, it's normal to miss home. But with time, the retirement home will become your new home. Never, murmured Walter. That place will never be my home. Sunshine Retirement Home was a 3-story building painted beige with green accents, located on a quiet street in the Brookside neighborhood. From the outside, it looked inviting, with a well-kept garden at the entrance. Inside, however, the reality was quite different. Walter was taken directly to the room he shared with George, an 81-year-old man who spent most of his time sleeping or watching TV. The room was small, with 2 beds, 2 closets, and a window overlooking the inner courtyard. Where were you, Walter? George asked as soon as his roommate entered. The nurse was looking for you all afternoon. I went home, Walter replied, sitting on the bed. And you, George, don't you ever think about leaving this place? Where would I go? The old man laughed. My kids live in New York City. They don't have time to take care of an old man like me. At least here I get meals on time and medicine when I need it. But don't you miss your freedom? Freedom for what? To sit alone in an apartment watching TV all day? At least here, I have company. Walter couldn't understand how George had accepted the situation so easily. For him, every day at the retirement home was a constant battle against depression and feelings of abandonment. Dinner was served promptly at 6 in the communal dining hall. Walter sat at a table with 3 other residents: Mrs. Thompson, a 75-year-old former teacher, Mr. Jenkins, a 78-year-old retired bus driver, and Mrs. Wilson, 82, who had lost the ability to speak after a stroke. Walter, I heard you ran away today, said Mrs. Thompson, always curious about the lives of the other residents. Did you go home? I didn't run away, he corrected. I just went out to take care of some things. What kind of things? Mr. Jenkins asked. Walter hesitated. He couldn't tell the others about the money, but he needed to confide in someone. Family matters, he said vaguely. Ah, I understand, Mrs. Thompson sighed. I have family matters too, but my daughter won't even let me leave to go to the bank. At least your daughter visits you, Mr. Jenkins remarked. My son brought me here 6 months ago and has only come by twice. The conversation about absent families left everyone silent. It was a painful topic for most residents who had been abandoned by their own children under the excuse of specialized care. After dinner, Walter returned to his room and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling as he planned his next move. The money was safe for now, but he needed to decide what to do with it before Michael found out about it. The next morning, right after breakfast, Margaret arrived to visit him, as promised. They sat in the retirement home's garden, where a few tables and chairs were set up for residents to receive visitors. Did you talk to that lawyer? Walter asked as soon as they had privacy. I did, Margaret replied. Dr. Peterson said he can help, but he'll need time to review the paperwork and prepare an appeal against the guardianship. How much time? At least 3 months. Walter shook his head. 3 months is too long. Michael will find out about the money and figure out a way to take it before then. Then we'll have to speed things up, Margaret said. Dr. Peterson suggested you get second opinions from other doctors about your mental capacity. How am I supposed to see doctors when I can't even leave this place? We can request they come here to examine you. It's your right. Walter considered the suggestion for a few moments. And what if we still can't get the guardianship overturned? Then we'll have to move to Plan B, said Margaret, lowering her voice. What's Plan B? Transfer the money to an account under my name temporarily. That way Michael can't touch it even if he finds out about it. The idea made Walter uneasy. Entrusting his entire fortune to a neighbor, no matter how dear she was, seemed like a huge risk. What if you decide to keep the money? He asked, unable to hide his suspicion. Margaret was offended by the question. Walter Johnson, you've known me for over 20 years. When have I ever needed your help? It was true, Margaret had always been a helpful and honest neighbor. When her husband lost his job, it was Walter who offered him work in construction. When she needed a loan for her daughter's surgery, Walter hadn't hesitated to help. I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't mean to offend you. It's just, I've been doubting even my own shadow lately. I understand, my dear. After what Michael did to you, it's only natural you'd distrust everyone. They were interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Robert Anderson, who was making his morning rounds. Good. Morning, Mr. Johnson. How was your night? Fine, doctor, he replied, trying to sound cooperative. Good. Let's talk in my office in a few minutes. I need to ask you some questions about your medical history. After the psychiatrist walked away, Margaret took Walter's hand. Think about my offer. It's the only way to protect the money while we fight for your freedom. I'll think about it, Walter promised. The conversation with Dr. Anderson in the office was more formal than the day before. The psychiatrist wanted to better understand Walter's mental health history and the reasons that led Michael to request the guardianship. Mr. Johnson, your son mentioned some concerning episodes over the last few months. Can you tell me about them? What episodes? Walter asked, genuinely confused. Memory lapses, confusion about dates, trouble making simple decisions. Doctor, everyone forgets things sometimes. That doesn't mean I'm losing my mind. Of course not. But when those lapses start affecting a person's safety, we need to take special precautions. What safety? I've lived alone for 5 years since my wife passed, and I've never had any problems. Dr. Anderson checked his notes. Your son mentioned finding the stove left on several times, and that you were buying unnecessary groceries, filling the fridge with expired food. Walter was outraged. That's a lie. Michael barely ever came to my house. How would he know if the stove was on or not? So you deny this happened? I completely deny it. My son is making up these stories to justify what he did to me. The psychiatrist jotted down a few more notes. Mr. Johnson, it's common for people in the early stages of dementia to be unaware of or deny their symptoms. But I don't have dementia, Walter shouted, losing his composure. Run all the tests you want, I'll prove I'm perfectly lucid. We'll do just that, Dr. Anderson said calmly. I'll schedule a full neuropsychological evaluation. It'll take a few weeks to get an appointment. A few weeks? Walter repeated, alarmed. Unfortunately, specialists have very full schedules. But don't worry, you'll be well taken care of here in the meantime. Walter left the office even more determined to act quickly. A few weeks could be too long if Michael discovered the money. He needed to make a decision about Margaret's proposal. At lunch, while pretending to eat the bland food served at the retirement home, Walter watched the other residents. Most seemed to have given up fighting against their situation. Some truly appeared to need specialized care, but others, like him, seemed to have been abandoned by families who no longer wanted to be bothered with their elderly. Mrs. Thompson approached the table where he was sitting. May I join you? Of course, Walter replied. You look troubled. Want to talk? Walter glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Margaret, do you trust your daughter? The question caught the former teacher off guard. I do, yes. Why do you ask? How can you trust her if she locked you up here? Mrs. Thompson let out a deep sigh. My daughter works 2 jobs just to afford this retirement home. She had no choice when my memory started failing. But do you think she did it for your Kazaki or her own convenience? Honestly, a bit of both. She cares about me, but she also doesn't have the time or means to care for me at home. And you're okay with that? What else can I do? Fighting with my daughter won't solve anything. It'll only push her further away. Mrs. Thompson's response made Walter reflect. Maybe his situation was different from hers. Michael hadn't acted out of love or concern, only financial interest. And that changed everything. That afternoon, during visiting hours, Margaret returned to the retirement home. This time, she brought some papers she'd prepared with Dr. Peterson's help. "These are basic documents to start the process," she explained. "Dr. Peterson said he needs your signature in a few places." Walter examined the papers. They were petitions requesting a second medical opinion and challenging the validity of the guardianship. "How much is he charging for this?" "Nothing for now. He said he'll only charge if we succeed in overturning the guardianship." "What? About that other matter we discussed?" Margaret looked around to ensure they were alone in the garden. "I brought the paperwork to open a joint account. It'll be in both our names, but you'll have full access to the money." "How does it work?" "We deposit the money into the account. If something happens to me, you can manage it freely. If something happens to you, I'll distribute it according. That are your instructions." The idea still made Walter uneasy, but he was starting to see it might be the only option. "What if Michael finds out about the account?" "He won't, because it won't be in your name," Margaret explained. "It'll be in mine with you as the secondary holder." "I need more time to think," Walter said. "Of course, but don't wait too long. The longer the money stays hidden in your house, the greater the risk of Michael discovering it." That night, Walter barely slept. He lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, weighing the pros and cons of entrusting his fortune to Margaret. On one hand, she was the only person he could still trust. On the other, he'd practically be handing over his entire life savings to someone else. George, his roommate, noticed he was still awake. "Can't sleep?" "Just thinking about some things," Walter replied. "Want to talk?" "Sometimes it helps." Walter considered telling George everything, but decided it was too risky. "It's about my son. I feel like I must have failed him somehow." "All parents feel that way at some point," George said. "I've wondered where I went wrong with my own kids, but in the end, everyone's responsible for their own choices." "Do you think everything can be forgiven?" "I think everything can be understood. Forgiveness is a decision each person makes in their own time." "What if someone did something unforgivable?" "Walter, you're a good man. I've known bad men, and you're not one of them. Whatever fight you had with your son, I'm sure it can be resolved with a conversation." If George knew the truth about Michael, perhaps he wouldn't speak so confidently about forgiveness and understanding. The next morning, Walter woke up with a decision made. He would accept Margaret's proposal, but with a few conditions. During breakfast, he asked to call her. "Margaret, it's me, Walter. I accept the joint account proposal, but I want it in writing that the money remains mine." "Of course, my dear. Dr. Peterson has already prepared a document to that effect. And I want you to promise that if anything happens to me, you'll use the money to help others going through the same situation." "What kind of help?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe paying lawyers for seniors who were institutionalized against their will, or creating a project to expose children who abandon their parents." "Don't worry. I'll honor your wishes." "Then let's do it today. Can you pick me up here at 2 in the afternoon?" "Yes, I can. I'll say it's a medical appointment." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, continuing. The plan was simple. Margaret would arrive at the retirement home at 2 in the afternoon, claiming she was taking Walter for a routine medical checkup. They would go to his house to get the money, then head to the bank to open the joint account. At exactly 2 o'clock, Margaret was at the reception desk of the retirement home. The head nurse, Mrs. Mitchell, a 50-year-old woman with grey hair tied in a bun, checked the medical authorization Margaret had falsified with Dr. Peterson's help. "Cardiology appointment," read Mrs. Mitchell. "All right, but I need you to bring Mr. Johnson back by 5. "Of course," Margaret agreed. "It won't take long." During the drive to the house, Walter was nervous. What if Michael had gone back there? What if the money was no longer hidden under the bed? "Calm down, Walter," said Margaret, noticing his agitation. "Everything will be fine. And if it goes wrong? What if Michael finds out what we're doing? Then at least you'll have tried to fight for your rights." They arrived at the house at 2:30. Walter used the key he had hidden under a flower pot on the porch. Michael had never discovered that hiding spot. The house was exactly as they had left it the day before. "Is the money still there?" asked Margaret as Walter hurried to the bedroom. "It's here," he replied, pulling the bag from under the bed. $350,000. Margaret helped recount the money, organizing it into smaller bundles for easier transport. They put everything into 2 ordinary grocery bags. "Now let's go to the bank," she said. "Which bank?" "First National Bank on 5th Avenue. Dr. Peterson has already spoken to the manager. Everything is ready." The drive to the bank was tense. Walter clutched one of the bags tightly, imagining what would happen if they were robbed or if Michael suddenly appeared. Margaret drove carefully, obeying all traffic signals. At the bank, they were greeted by the manager, Mr. Collins, a middle-aged man who had already been briefed by Dr. Peterson about the situation. "Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Margaret, welcome. We'll handle everything with the utmost discretion." The joint account opening process took about an hour. Walter had to sign several documents, all prepared in advance by the lawyer. The money was deposited into a joint savings account with free access for both holders. "All set," said Mr. Collins, handing over the card and PIN. "The account is open and the money is secure. You can access it whenever you want." Walter held the card as if it were the most precious object in the world. At last, he had managed to protect his fortune from Michael's grasp. "Thank you, Mr. Collins," said Margaret. "And remember, absolute secrecy about this operation." "Of course, it's bank policy." They left the bank at 4:15. They only had 45 minutes to get back to the retirement home before Walter's absence was noticed. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked on the way back. "Relieved," Walter replied, "and at the same time, scared of what will happen when Michael finds out the money is gone. He won't find out anytime soon, and when he does, he won't be able to prove you took it." "True. At least now I have an ace up my sleeve." They arrived at the retirement home at exactly 5 o'clock. Mrs. Mitchell was at the front desk checking the residents' records. "How was the appointment?" she asked. "Everything went fine," Margaret replied. "The cardiologist said Walter's heart is in great shape for his age." "That's wonderful," Mrs. Mitchell smiled. "Mr. Johnson, dinner will be served in an hour." Walter nodded and headed to his room, where he found George watching TV. "So how was the appointment?" "It went well," Walter lied. "The doctor said I'm in good health." "Great. You needed some good news." At dinner, Walter ate with more appetite than he had shown since arriving at the retirement home. For the first time in months, he felt like he had some control over his own life. Mrs. Thompson noticed the change in his mood. "You seem livelier today." "I'm coming to terms with the situation," he lied. "It's the best thing to do." Fighting. Reality only makes us bitter. If she had known Walter wasn't accepting anything but planning his revenge, she might not have spoken so confidently about accepting reality. That night, for the first time in weeks, Walter slept peacefully. The money was safe. Dr. Peterson was working on the appeal against the guardianship, and Michael had no idea what was happening. But the peace didn't last long. The next morning, at breakfast, Mrs. Mitchell approached Walter's table with a worried expression. "Mr. Johnson, I need to speak with you. Your son called this morning asking about yesterday's appointment." Walter's heart skipped a beat. "What did he want to know?" "He asked which doctor you saw and which hospital. He said he wanted to check if everything was in order with your health insurance." "And what did you tell him?" "I said I didn't have that information, that it was your neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, who accompanied you." Walter swallowed hard. Michael started suspecting and decided to investigate, he'd find out the medical appointment was fake. Did he say anything else? "He said he'd call Mrs. Johnson to clarify the details." Walter abruptly stood up, knocking over his coffee cup. "I need to make an urgent phone call," he said, heading to the front desk. "Mr. Johnson, it's too early for calls," Mrs. Mitchell protested. "It's a medical emergency," he lied. Mrs. Mitchell allowed him to use the phone. Walter quickly dialed Margaret's number. "Hello? Margaret, it's me. Michael is suspicious about yesterday's appointment. He's going to call you." "Calm down, Walter. I've already thought about him." this. If he calls, I'll say I took you to a private appointment with a cardiologist I know. What if he asks for details? I'll make something up, relax. Margaret, I think I'm putting you in danger. I'm not in any danger. I'm a 72-year-old woman helping a friend. What's wrong with that? Walter hung up, still worried. He knew Michael well enough to understand that once he started suspecting something, he wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. Throughout the morning, he tried to focus on the retirement home's activities, bingo, physical therapy, lunch, but his mind kept drifting to the potential problems that could arise. Around 2 in the afternoon, Mrs. Mitchell approached him again. Mr. Walter, your son is here to visit you. Walter felt his stomach turn. Michael never visited without a specific reason. Where is he? In the visiting room. Michael was sitting in one of the armchairs, wearing a grey suit and a serious expression. When he saw his father enter, he stood up with a forced smile. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling? Fine, Walter replied, trying to sound natural. What? Surprised to see you visit me. I came because I was worried about yesterday's appointment. Mrs. Johnson told me you saw a private cardiologist. That's true. So what? Dad, you don't need a private cardiologist. Your health insurance covers all specialties at Mercy Medical Center. Margaret knew the doctor and thought it was better to take me there. Michael sat back down, watching his father carefully. Who was this doctor? Walter hesitated for a moment. He didn't know what name Margaret had made up. Dr. James, he said, hoping the lie would stick. Dr. James what? I don't remember the full last name. Where's the office? Michael, why so many questions? It was just a routine checkup, I'm fine. I'm asking because I care about you, Dad, and because I found it strange that Mrs. Johnson decided to take you to a doctor I don't know. She's helping me because you abandoned me here, Walter shot back, unable to hide his resentment. I didn't abandon you. I brought you to a place where they can take better care of you than I could. Liar. You brought me here because you want to sell my house without me getting in the way. Michael sighed as if losing patience. Dad, we've talked about this. The house is too big for you to live alone. It's better to sell it and invest the money to ensure your medical care. And where would that money be invested? In your account? It would be in an account in your name, which I'd manage as your legal guardian. Walter laughed bitterly. Right. And I'd never see a dime of that money again. Dad, you're being unfair to me. Everything I do is for your well-being. If that were true, you wouldn't have put me here against my will. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Anderson, who wanted to speak with Michael about Walter's mental state. Mr. Johnson, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to discuss the tests we'll be running on your father. Of course. Doctor, should we talk in your office? That would be best. The two stood up and left the room, leaving Walter alone with his thoughts. He knew Dr. Anderson was telling Michael about the neuropsychological evaluation he'd scheduled, and that made him even more worried. 15 minutes later, Michael returned to the visiting room. Dad, Dr. Anderson told me about the tests you'll be having. It's important that you cooperate with the doctors. I'll cooperate. I want to prove I don't need to be here. Dad, even if the tests show you're lucid, that doesn't mean you can go back to living alone. It's not just a mental issue, it's physical and social too. What do you mean by that? I mean you need companionship, regular medical care, a structured routine, all of which you have here at the retirement home. I had all of that at home. No, you didn't, Dad. You were isolated with no one to talk to, eating poorly, forgetting to take your meds. That's a lie. It's not a lie. I went to your house and saw how things were. You barely ever came to my house. Michael fell silent for a moment, as if gathering patience to continue. Dad, I know you're angry with me right now, but in time you'll understand this was all necessary. What was necessary was you stealing my freedom so you could steal my house too. No one's stealing anything. The house will be sold and the money will be kept for you, in an account you'll manage. Exactly, because I'm your legal guardian. What if I don't want you to be my guardian? Dad, that decision isn't yours anymore. It was decided by the judge. The words hit Walter like a hammer to his conscience. Michael was right. Legally, he no longer had control over his own life. All important decisions now went through his son. "I need to go," Michael said, checking his watch. "I have a meeting at 4. "Of course. Your business is more important than your father. Dad, don't be like that. I'll come visit you next week." After Michael left, Walter sat in the living room, lost in thought. With every meeting, his conviction that he'd made the right choice grew stronger. Michael showed no remorse for what he'd done. If anything, he thought he was being kind. That evening at dinner, Mrs. Thompson noticed Walter seemed more downcast. "Did you have a visitor today?" "My son came by." "That's nice. How did it go?" "Terrible," Walter replied. "Every conversation with him just proves he did all this for his own gain." "Walter, maybe you're being too hard on him. Sometimes children think they're doing what's best for their parents, even when they're wrong." "That's not the case, Mrs. Thompson. My son sees me as a burden to be managed." "And what do you plan to do about it?" Walter glanced around, making sure no one was listening. "I'm taking steps." "What kind of steps?" "I'd rather not go into details." Mrs. Thompson respected her friend's privacy and changed the subject. But she was worried by the determination in Walter's voice. She'd known enough desperate people to recognize he was planning something he saw as irreversible. The next morning, Margaret returned to the retirement home for a routine visit. This time they talked in Walter's room, while George was at physical therapy. "Michael called me last night," she said as soon as they were alone. "And?" "He asked a lot of questions about the appointment. I told him I made up a Dr. James Cooper, a cardiologist, with an office in Greenwich Village." "Did he believe it?" "He seemed to, but kept asking questions. He wanted to know about tests, prescriptions, that sort of thing." "What did you say?" "That the doctor said your heart is fine, but you need to stay on your meds." "But do you think he suspects something?" "I think so. Michael isn't stupid, Walter. He knows something's off." The news made Walter even more anxious. If Michael started digging, it wouldn't take long for him to discover they'd lied about the doctor's visit. "What do we do now?" "We stick to the plan," Margaret replied. "Dr. Peterson said he'd speed up the appeal. We might get a hearing in 2 weeks. 2 weeks might be too long. It's all we have for now, and the money is safe in the bank. Margaret, if Michael finds out what we've done, you could face legal trouble." "Let me worry about that. I'm just a harmless old lady." Walter admired his neighbor's courage, but knew she didn't understand Michael like he did. His son could be charming and persuasive when he wanted, but he could also be ruthless if he felt betrayed. "There's something I haven't told you," Walter said after a long silence. "What?" Michael didn't act alone in all this. He had help. "Help from who?" "Jennifer, my daughter-in-law. She's the one who came up with the idea to put me here." Margaret didn't know Jennifer personally, but had heard Walter mention her before. "How do you know that?" "Because I overheard a phone call between them about 2 months before they brought me here. Jennifer said I was getting in the way of their plans, and they needed to handle the old man before I ruined everything." "What plans were those?" "I'm not sure. But I suspect it involves much more money than they imagine." "What do you mean?" "Margaret, my house is worth at least $500,000, and they know I have a good pension, which brings in almost $3,000 a month. Not to mention they think I have money invested in the bank." "Do you?" "No. All my money was at home, and now it's in our joint account." "But they don't know that." "So you think their intention is to take everything?" "I'm sure of it, and the worst part is legally they can do it. Since I'm considered incompetent, Michael can sell all my assets and use the money however he sees fit." The revelation left Margaret alarmed. She had thought Walter's situation was just a case of a neglectful son, but now she realized it was something far more serious. "Walter, this changes everything. We need to tell Dr. Peterson about this conversation you overheard." "I have no way to prove it. It's my word against theirs." "But it could be used as evidence that the guardianship was based on financial motives, not medical ones. Do you think that would make a difference?" "I don't know, but it's worth trying." They were interrupted by George returning from physical therapy. "Hello, Mrs. Johnson," the elderly man greeted. "How are you?" "Fine, George. And you?" "Better every day. The physical therapist said I'm making progress." "That's good. George noticed the serious expressions on their faces. Did something happen? No, nothing major, Walter replied quickly. If you need to talk privately, I can take a walk in the garden. That's not necessary, George, Margaret said, already getting up to leave. It's true, she confirmed, standing. Walter, think about what we discussed. I'll speak with Dr. Peterson about that matter. After Margaret left, George sat on the bed and studied Walter for a moment. My friend, I know it's none of my business, but you seem to be going through something serious. Why do you say that? Because I recognize the look of someone who's been betrayed by the ones they love most. George's observation hit Walter hard. That was exactly what he felt. The pain of betrayal from someone he had trusted unconditionally. George, have you ever been through this? I have. My oldest son tried to convince me to transfer all my assets to his name, saying it was to protect me from taxes. Later, I found out he was in debt and wanted to use my property as collateral. What did you do? I cut ties with him. It was painful, but it was the only way to protect myself. Do you regret it? Sometimes, but I'd rather live with the pain of separation than the humiliation of being deceived. The conversation with George gave Walter a new perspective on his situation. Maybe by cutting ties with Michael, he could find some peace, even if it meant being alone in the world. Over the next few days, Walter avoided answering Michael's calls. Whenever his son tried to reach him through the retirement home's phone, he asked the nurses to say he was sleeping or in therapy. The strategy worked for a week, until Michael showed up unannounced. Dad, why aren't you answering my calls? He asked, stepping into the room where Walter was resting. Because I have nothing to say to you, Walter replied, without even looking at him. Dad, I know you're upset with me, but we need to keep talking. Why? So you can keep lying about your motives? Michael sighed and sat in the chair beside the bed. What motives do you think I have? Money. You want to take my house, my pension, everything I've built in my life. Dad, that's not true. I just want to make sure you get the care you need. Liar. Dad, you're being unfair. When have I ever asked for your money for something personal? Walter finally looked at his son. Michael, you're lying to my face. I heard your conversation with Jennifer about handling the old man's situation before I complicated everything. Michael's expression changed drastically. For a few seconds, he seemed genuinely surprised and embarrassed. You heard our conversation? Yes, I did. And now I know exactly why you brought me here. Michael stayed silent for a moment, as if deciding whether to keep lying or admit the truth. Dad, the situation is more complicated than you think. How so? Jennifer and I are having some financial trouble. Her business is struggling and we need a loan to avoid bankruptcy. So you decided to lock me up here. It wasn't like that. When we noticed you were having some memory lapses, we thought it was an opportunity to reorganize your finances, to help the family. What memory lapses? Are you really going to keep lying? Dad, you forgot my birthday 2 years in a row. You forgot my wife's name several times. You left the stove on at least 3 times that I know of. That's a lie. It's not, Dad, and you know it's not. Walter felt confused. Could he really have had memory lapses without realizing it? Or was Michael just very convincing with his lies? Even if I forgot a few things, that doesn't justify committing me against my will. Dad, guardianship was the only way to protect you from making financial decisions you might regret later. What kind of decisions? Like lending money to people you don't know or falling for scams? I'd never do that. Dad, the week before we brought you here, you almost lent $5,000 to a neighbor who promised to pay it back in 2 weeks. Walter vaguely remembered the incident. Mr. Rodriguez, who lived 3 houses down, had asked for a loan because his daughter needed urgent surgery. So what? Mr. Rodriguez is an honest man. Dad, Mr. Rodriguez passed away 2 years ago. The person who asked for the money was a stranger pretending to be him. The information left Walter stunned. How could he have mistaken a stranger for Mr. Rodriguez? Was he really starting to have memory problems? You're making this up to confuse me, he said, but his voice was less convincing. Dad, why would I make something like that up? What would I gain by lying to you? To justify what you did to me. Michael stood up and walked to the bedroom window. Dad, I admit we made mistakes. We should have talked to you more before filing for guardianship, but we did it for your own good. And Jennifer's financial problems, was that for my own good too? No, that was my mistake. I mixed things up and made everything worse. For the first time since being committed, Walter saw what looked like genuine regret in his son's expression. So now what? What do you plan to do? I want you to take the neuropsychological tests Dr. Anderson scheduled. If they show you're lucid and capable, I'll petition to reverse the guardianship. And if they show I have memory problems, then we'll talk about the best options for you. Maybe a home caregiver or a better retirement home than this one. What about your business? The financial trouble? We'll figure it out another way. Maybe by selling our apartment or taking out a bank loan. The conversation left Walter conflicted. Part of him wanted to believe Michael was being sincere, but another part suspected it was just another manipulation. Michael, I need time to think about all this. Of course, Dad, I don't want to pressure you. And I need you to stop treating me like a child. If I'm going through these tests, I want to know all the results, not just what you think I should know. I agree. You have the right to know everything. After Michael left, Walter stayed in his room thinking about their conversation. Had he misjudged his son? Or was he falling into another trap set by Michael and Jennifer? George returned from occupational therapy and noticed his roommate's thoughtful expression. Was your son here? He was, and he said some things that left me confused. What kind of things? He mentioned I had some memory lapses before being admitted, and that the guardianship was to protect me from scammers. Do you remember those lapses? Some, yes, but I thought they were just normal distractions. Walter, can I give you some advice? Of course. Take the medical tests they're asking for. If they show you're fine, demand your rights back. If they show problems, at least you'll know the truth about your condition. And what if I find out I really do have memory issues? Then you can make informed decisions about your future instead of just guessing. George's advice made sense. Walter decided he would cooperate with the tests, but also keep the money protected in the joint account with Margaret, at least until he was sure of Michael's true intentions. The next day, during Margaret's visit, Walter told her about the conversation with Michael. What did you think of his explanations? She asked. I'll admit I'm confused. Some of what he said makes sense. Which part? About me having memory lapses. I vaguely remember some strange situations over the past few months, but that doesn't justify admitting you without talking to you first. True, and it doesn't explain why he lied about the reasons in the beginning. Walter, I think you should still take the tests. That way you'll know for sure what your condition is. That's what I'm thinking, but I'll keep the money in our joint account for now. Of course, better to make sure it's protected. And if the tests show I have memory problems, what do we do with the money? Then we'll discuss our options. Maybe a living will or some other legal arrangement to ensure you still have control over important decisions. The possibility of memory problems frightened Walter more than he wanted to admit. He'd seen other seniors go through it and knew how devastating it was to lose the ability to make your own choices. Margaret, if I lose my mental capacity, promise me you won't let anyone treat me like an object. I promise, my dear. You'll always be treated with dignity and respect. And promise you'll use the money to help me have the best quality of life possible. I promise that too. Their conversation was interrupted by a nurse arriving to take Walter to his appointment with Dr. Anderson. Mr. Johnson, the doctor is waiting for you. In the office, Dr. Anderson was accompanied by a neuropsychologist, Dr. Catherine, a woman in her 40s with brown hair tied in a ponytail. Mr. Johnson, this is Dr. Catherine. She'll be conducting your neuropsychological evaluation. Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson, the neuropsychologist greeted. Your son mentioned you'd like a full assessment to clarify questions about your mental capacity. Exactly. I want to know if I really have memory problems or if it was all a misunderstanding. Perfect. We'll do a series of tests over 3 sessions. Today we'll start with the first part. The evaluation began with simple tests of time and spatial orientation, which Walter passed easily. Then came short and long-term memory tests, some of which were more challenging. Mr. Johnson, I'll say a list of words and then ask you to repeat them, Dr. Catherine explained. All right? House, blue, car, book, phone, garden, doctor. Walter managed to repeat 5 of the 7 words. Now I'll tell you a short story, and I want you to repeat it back to me with as many details as possible. The story was about a woman who went to the market to buy ingredients for her daughter's birthday cake. Walter remembered the main points but forgot some specific details. The tests continued for 2 hours, covering different aspects of cognitive function. Some Walter did very well on, others he had moderate difficulty with. How did you find the tests? Dr. Catherine asked at the end. Some were easy, others harder, Walter admitted. I feel like my memory isn't as sharp as it used to be. It's normal to feel that way. We'll do 2 more sessions in the coming days, and then I'll compile all the results. When will I get the final results? In a week after we complete all the evaluations. Walter left the office with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was relieved to have answered most of the tests correctly. On the other, he realized there were indeed some memory limitations he hadn't noticed before. During dinner, Mrs. Thompson asked about the appointment. How were the tests? Complicated, Walter replied. Some I did well on, others were harder. That's how it goes. The important thing is knowing the truth about your condition. Did you take similar tests when you first got here? I did. I found out I have some age-related memory issues, but nothing serious. How do you feel knowing that? Relieved, actually. At least now I know my limitations and can adjust. Do you think your problems will get worse? Maybe. But until then, I'll live the best I can. Mrs. Thompson's philosophy impressed Walter. She had found a way to accept her limitations without losing her dignity or joy for life. That night, before bed, Walter made a decision, no matter the test. Results. He would fight to maintain some control over his own life. If he had memory problems, he'd learn to manage them. If he didn't, he'd demand his freedom back. George, can I ask you something? Of course. If you found out you had memory problems, what would you do? It would depend on how severe they were. What if they were moderate? I'd try to arrange for a caregiver and keep living at home. Independence is very important to me. Even knowing the risks. Walter, life has risks. I could trip and fall even here at the retirement home. What matters is quality of life. Do you think I should go home if the tests show only mild problems? I think you should do what makes you happiest, as long as you take the necessary precautions. The conversation with George strengthened Walter's resolve not to passively accept whatever decisions others made about his life. The next morning, Margaret arrived early to visit him. How were the tests yesterday? Tough. I realized I do have some memory issues. What kind of issues? I forget details of stories I just heard, and I struggle to remember word lists. Is it serious? I don't know yet. The neuropsychologist will do 2 more tests and then give me the full results. How do you feel knowing this? Sad but also relieved to be learning the truth. Walter, no matter the results, we'll find a way for you to have control over your life. How? Dr. Peterson mentioned something called supported decision-making. It's for people who have some limitations but can still make decisions with help. How does it work? You choose trusted people to help you understand complex issues and make important decisions. But the final choice is always yours. The idea seemed interesting to Walter, and Michael couldn't interfere with this. Not if it's legally established. You'd have the right to choose your own supporters. And who would these supporters be? It could be me, Dr. Peterson, or anyone else you trust. Margaret, would you do this for me? Of course, my dear. It would be an honor to help you maintain your autonomy. The possibility of having an alternative to full guardianship gave Walter new hope. Maybe he wouldn't have to choose between total independence or complete dependence. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot for those of us just starting out. Now continuing. The second session of neuropsychological tests was even harder than the first. Dr. Catherine administered more complex tests on logical reasoning, planning, and decision-making. Mr. Johnson, I'm going to give you a problem to solve. Imagine you have $50 and need to buy gifts for 3 grandchildren. Each gift costs $15. What would you do? Walter thought for a moment. I'd buy 2 gifts for $15 and 1 for $20, spending $50. But you said you only had $50. How could you buy a $20 gift? Walter realized the mistake in his reasoning and grew confused. Sorry, I mixed up the numbers. No problem. Let's try again. Mistakes like this repeated several times during the session. Walter noticed his ability to do mental math and solve logical problems was slipping. Dr. Catherine, does this mean I have Alzheimer's? Mr. Johnson, I can't give a premature diagnosis. Let's wait for the full results of all the tests. But can I know how I'm doing? You're doing better in some areas than others. It's common for people your age. The answer wasn't very clear, but Walter sensed the neuropsychologist was trying not to scare him before having all the results. After the session, he returned to his room feeling down. George noticed his mood. The test didn't go well. Not as I'd hoped. I made several mistakes in things that used to be easy for me. Walter, remember what I told you about accepting our limits? I do. Maybe it's time to start thinking about that. Do you think I should stop fighting for my freedom? I don't mean that, but maybe you should fight for a freedom adapted to your current needs. How so? Instead of wanting to live alone again, maybe you could live with help. Instead of making all decisions alone, maybe you could make them with support. George's words made Walter reflect on his expectations. Maybe he was being stubborn by insisting on going back to exactly the life he had before. In the third and final test session, Dr. Catherine focused on practical aspects of daily life. Mr. Johnson, I'll simulate some everyday situations. If someone knocked on your door saying they were from the bank and needed to see your documents, what would you do? I'd ask them to come back another day and call the bank to confirm if it was true. Perfect. And if you got a call offering a lottery prize you didn't play, I'd hang up right away. Very good. And if you forgot to take an important medication? I'd take it as soon as I remembered, but I wouldn't double the dose. In this part of the tests, Walter did much better. His practical decisions seemed intact, even if his memory and math skills were slipping. Dr. Catherine, when will I get the final results? I'll compile everything by Friday. On Monday, we'll have a meeting with you, your son, and Dr. Anderson to discuss the results. Can I bring someone I trust to that meeting? Of course. Who would you like to bring? My neighbor, Mrs. Johnson. She's been helping me a lot through this process. Not a problem. I'll schedule it for Monday at 2 in the afternoon. Over the weekend, Walter could barely relax. His mind kept circling back to the possible test results and what they might mean. Margaret came to visit him on Saturday afternoon. Are you anxious about the results? Very, and scared of what I might find out. Walter, no matter what the results are, we'll find the best solution for you. What if it's Alzheimer's? What if I'm losing the ability to make decisions? Then we'll set up a way for you to have support in making decisions without losing your autonomy completely. Margaret, can I ask you a favor? Of course. If I lose my mental capacity, in the future, promise me you won't let anyone mistreat me or treat me like an object. I promise, Walter, and I also promise to respect your wishes about how you want to be cared for. Thank you. That gives me some peace of mind. Monday came quickly. Walter dressed carefully for the meeting, putting on his best shirt and shaving meticulously. He wanted to look presentable when receiving results that could change his life. Margaret arrived promptly at 2 in the afternoon. They headed to the meeting room at the retirement home, where Dr. Anderson, Dr. Catherine, and Michael were already waiting. Good afternoon, everyone, the neuropsychologist greeted. Let's discuss the results of Mr. Johnson's evaluation. Everyone sat around a round table. Walter was visibly nervous, gripping Margaret's hand tightly. Mr. Johnson, I conducted a full assessment of your cognitive functions, Dr. Catherine began. The results show a mixed picture. What does that mean? Walter asked. It means some areas are preserved while others show decline consistent with your age. Can you be more specific? Margaret asked. Of course. Mr. Johnson maintains excellent practical judgment, spatial and temporal orientation, and his long-term memories are well preserved. And the problem areas? Michael asked. There's decline in working memory, difficulty with complex math calculations, and some issues with sustained attention. Is it Alzheimer's? Walter asked directly. No, the findings are consistent with normal cognitive aging, perhaps slightly more pronounced than average for your age. Walter felt immense relief. Does this mean I can make my own decisions? With some caveats, Dr. Catherine replied. For simple everyday decisions, yes. For complex financial or medical decisions, it would be advisable to have support. What kind of support? Margaret asked. Someone who can help you understand complex information and think through options without taking away his decision-making power. That's exactly what we talked about. Supported decision-making, Margaret murmured to Walter. Dr. Anderson spoke up. Based on these results, I believe Mr. Johnson can have more autonomy than he currently does here at the retirement home. What does that mean in practice? Michael asked. It means he could live more independently, perhaps with some support, rather than needing full institutional care. Michael seemed surprised by the conclusion. But doctor, my father had several episodes of confusion before coming here. It's possible those were caused by stress, social isolation, or even depression, Dr. Catherine explained. The evaluations show his core cognitive ability is intact. So, what do you recommend? Walter asked. I recommend a gradual transition toward greater independence, Dr. Anderson said. Maybe starting with more frequent outings, then overnight stays at home, eventually leading to moving back home with proper support. What kind of support? Margaret asked. A caregiver for a few hours each day, regular medical checkups, and a support system for important decisions, explained Dr. Catherine. Walter could hardly believe what he was hearing. Not only did he not have Alzheimer's, but he could also regain a more independent life. Michael, what do you think of these recommendations? Asked Dr. Robert Anderson. Michael seemed to be processing the information. I need to think about it. It's a big change from what I had imagined. Dad, would you like to try this gradual transition? Asked Dr. Anderson. Very much, Walter replied, emotional. More than anything in the world. Then let's put together a plan, said the neuropsychologist. Starting with supervised weekend outings, progressing as you adjust. After the meeting, Michael asked to speak with Walter privately. Dad, I want to apologize. I thought your issues were more serious than they really are. Michael, were you acting because you thought you were protecting me? Yes, but I admit I also thought about the financial aspect. That was wrong of me. And now, how do we fix this? I'll talk to my lawyer about reversing the guardianship, and I'll respect your wishes about where and how you want to live. What about your and Jennifer's financial problems? We'll figure it out another way, maybe by selling our apartment and buying a smaller one. For the first time in months, Walter saw genuine sincerity in his son's expression. Michael, I need to tell you something. What is it, Dad? I have some money saved that you don't know about. Michael looked surprised but calm. How much? A considerable amount. It was hidden at home. Where is it now? In a safe place. Margaret helped me protect it. Dad, if you have your own money, you can use it however you want. You don't need my permission. Even while the guardianship is still in place, technically you do, but I promise I won't interfere with your personal financial decisions. The conversation with Michael left Walter more optimistic than he had felt in a long time. It seemed his son had truly understood his mistakes and was willing to make things right. After Michael left, Margaret approached Walter. How do you feel after all this? Relieved, happy, hopeful, he replied, and very grateful for your help. What do you plan to do now? First, I want to start the weekend outings. Then I'd like to talk about returning home with some support. And the money. For now, it'll stay in our joint account. Once the guardianship is reversed, I can transfer it back to my personal account. What if you decide to help Michael with his financial problems? Maybe I will, but it'll be my decision on my terms. I think that's wise. That night, Walter slept better than he had in months. For the first time since arriving at the retirement home, he had real hope that he could rebuild his life and reclaim his dignity. George noticed the change in his roommate's mood. Did the tests bring good news? Very good news. I don't have Alzheimer's, and I can regain more independence. That's wonderful. And your son? How did he react? Better than I expected. It seems he really understood his mistakes. And when can you start leaving here? Dr. Anderson said I can begin with weekend outings as early as next Saturday. Walter, I'm so happy for you. You deserve to have your life back. The first weekend outing was scheduled for the following Saturday. Margaret would pick him up in the morning and take him to spend the day at home, returning to the retirement home on Sunday evening. During the week leading up to the outing, Walter mentally prepared himself to see his house again. He knew it would be emotional, but he also knew it might bring back painful memories from the past few months. On Saturday morning, he dressed in his best clothes and eagerly waited for Margaret to arrive. When she appeared at the reception desk, he was so emotional that he began to cry. "Ready to go home?" she asked, smiling. "More than ready," he replied, wiping away his tears. During the drive, Walter observed every street, every familiar corner. Everything looked the same, yet different after all he had been through. "How does it feel to be back?" Margaret asked. "It's strange. Feels like an eternity since I've seen my home. It's only been a few months. The longest months of my life." When they arrived at the house, Walter stood in front of the gate for a few moments, just taking in the place where he had been happy for so many years. "Everything's the same," he murmured. "I come here twice a week to water the plants and check on things," Margaret explained. "Thank you for taking care of everything." They entered the house together. Walter walked slowly through the rooms, touching the furniture, looking at the personal belongings he had left behind. It was as if he were rediscovering his own identity. "Do you miss anything?" Margaret asked. "I miss everything. The smell of the house, the sound of the fridge, the view from the bedroom window. And what don't you miss? The loneliness. In the months before the hospitalization, I was truly very alone. Do you think it would be different now?" "I think so. Now I know I have you as a friend, and maybe I can hire someone to keep me company for a few hours a day." They spent the morning organizing some belongings Walter wanted to take back to the retirement home. They also discussed modifications that could be made to the house to make it safer and more suitable for an elderly person. "We can install grab bars in the bathroom, improve the lighting, maybe hire a cleaning service," Margaret suggested. "What about a medical alert system?" Walter added. "Good idea. That way you can call for help if needed." In the afternoon, they went to the bank branch where they had opened the joint account. Walter wanted to check if everything was in order and talk to the manager about his future plans. "Mr. Johnson, it's good to see you again," Mr. Collins greeted him. "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. I came to talk about the account we opened." "Of course. Everything is functioning normally. I'd like to know how to transfer the money back to an account in my name once the guardianship is reversed. It's a simple process. You'll just need documentation proving the reversal. And until then, can I access the account as usual?" "Yes, both you and Mrs. Johnson have full access." "Perfect." The trip to the bank left Walter feeling more at ease about his finances. Knowing he had his own resources gave him a sense of security and autonomy he had lost in recent months. On Sunday morning, they received an unexpected visit. Michael and Jennifer appeared at the door. "Dad, I heard you were spending the weekend." "At home," Michael said. "We wanted to talk to you." "Come in," Walter said, though he felt somewhat apprehensive. Jennifer, a 40-year-old woman with blonde hair and an elegant appearance, seemed uncomfortable. It was the first time they had spoken since Walter had been hospitalized. "Walter, I want to apologize," she said as soon as they sat in the living room. "I pressured Michael into making hasty decisions about your situation. Jennifer, did you think I was a burden? That wasn't it. I was afraid you might fall or get hurt living alone and Michael would feel guilty. And the financial matters. We were really going through some difficulties, but that doesn't justify mixing things up. And now, how are things?" "We've decided to sell our apartment and buy something smaller," Michael explained, "and explore other options for the company's problems." "What about me? What are your plans?" "We want you to come home when you feel ready," said Jennifer, "and we promise to respect your independence. Even if I make decisions you don't agree with?" "Even then," confirmed Michael, "they're your decisions to make. The conversation lasted over 2 hours. Walter noticed that Michael and Jennifer truly seemed remorseful and willing to rebuild their family relationship. "Michael, there's something I want to tell you," Walter said as the conversation was winding down. "What is it, Dad?" "I have a financial reserve you didn't know about. I've been saving money for years for emergencies." "How much money?" Jennifer asked. "Enough to support myself for many years and still help you if needed." "Dad, you don't have to help us," Michael said. "We'll handle our problems on our own." "I know, but maybe I want to help. On my terms." "What terms?" "First, that my guardianship is completely reversed. Second, that you accept I'll live at home with the support I choose. Third, that you respect my financial decisions." "We agree to all of that," Jennifer said. "And if I decide to leave some of the money to people other than you?" "That's your right," Michael said. "It's your money." "Perfect. Then let's work together to settle everything." On Sunday evening, when he returned to the retirement home, Walter was exhausted but happy. The weekend at home had gone better than expected, and the conversation with Michael and Jennifer had been surprisingly positive. "How was your weekend?" George asked. "Wonderful. I felt like I was becoming myself again." "And your family?" "They came over for a very honest talk. I think they finally understood the mistakes they made." "When do you think you'll be able to go home for good?" "Dr. Anderson said we can speed up the process if this weekend went well, maybe in 2 or 3 weeks. I'll miss you, my friend." "I'll miss you too, George. You've helped me so much during this difficult time." On Monday morning, Dr. Anderson met with Walter to discuss the weekend. "How did you feel at home?" "Very good. I managed everything on my own, no memory issues or confusion. And emotionally, it was freeing to be in my own space again." "Any difficulties?" "Just moments of loneliness. But I think I can fix that by hiring a caregiver for companionship." "Perfect. Based on your report and Dr. Catherine's evaluation, I believe we can speed up your transition home." "What does that mean?" "You can spend the next 2 weekends at home, and if all goes well, you can return permanently at the start of next month." "Really?" Walter asked, emotional. "Really. But with a few conditions." "What are they?" "First, you need to hire a caregiver for at least 4 hours a day. Second, you must install a medical alert system. Third, you need regular checkups with me." "I accept all the conditions." "Great. I'll start preparing your discharge paperwork." Walter could hardly believe he was finally close to reclaiming his freedom. He left the office practically floating with happiness. Over the next weekends, he followed all medical recommendations diligently. He hired a caregiver named Mrs. Johnson, a 55-year-old woman experienced in senior care. He installed grab bars in the bathroom, improved the home's lighting, and hired a weekly cleaning service. "How are you adjusting with Mrs. Johnson?" Margaret asked during one of her visits. "Very well. She helps with some chores and keeps me company, but respects my privacy." "And the medical alert system?" "It's installed. It's a button I wear around my neck. If I need help, I just press it." "Do you feel safe enough to go back for good?" "Very safe, and very eager." The discharge date was set for a Friday. Walter spent the previous week organizing his belongings at the retirement home and saying goodbye to the staff and other residents. "Will you miss anything from here?" asked Mrs. Thompson. "I'll miss the friendships I made, but I won't miss the lack of freedom. I hope you'll be very happy at home." "Thank you, Marlene. And you? Don't you think about trying to go home too?" "Sometimes I do, but my situation is different from yours. My memory problems are a bit more serious. But you could try what Dr. Anderson suggested for me, a gradual return." "Maybe. I'll talk to my daughter about it." The conversation with Mrs. Thompson made Walter think about other residents who might benefit from a more careful evaluation of their conditions. Perhaps some were at the retirement home unnecessarily, as had happened with him. On Thursday night, his last night there, Walter had a long talk with George. "Thank you for everything, my friend. You helped me keep my sanity during the toughest times. It was a pleasure having your company, Walter. You taught me it's never too late to fight for our rights. And you taught me that accepting our limitations doesn't mean giving up on living. Promise you'll visit me?" "I promise." And promise you'll consider getting a neuropsychological evaluation. Maybe you could have more independence too. I'll think about it, yes. On Friday morning, Margaret arrived early to pick up Walter. Dr. Anderson had one last conversation before the discharge. Mr. Johnson, remember you can reach out if you need anything. Thank you, Doctor, for everything. It was a pleasure. Following your recovery, you're proof that age doesn't mean incapability. Doctor, may I suggest other residents get evaluations like mine? Of course. In fact, we've already started reassessing some cases based on your example. Walter left the retirement home carrying a small suitcase with his belongings. As he passed the reception desk, Mrs. Mitchell wished him luck. It was a pleasure caring for you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Socorro. Take good care of my friends. Here. The ride home was quiet. Walter watched the familiar streets through the window, knowing this time he was back for good. How do you feel? Asked Margaret. Free, he answered simply. Arriving home, Walter stood at the door for a few moments, just as he had on the first weekend. But this time the feeling was different. It wasn't a temporary visit. It was a permanent return. Welcome back to your home, said Margaret, opening the door. Thank you for making this possible, he replied, stepping inside. The house was spotless. Margaret had hired a special cleaning service and even placed fresh flowers in some vases. Mrs. Johnson was there waiting, ready to help with the transition. Mr. Johnson, it's so good to have you back, said the caregiver. Thank you, Rosa. I'm happy to be here. They spent the rest of the day organizing the house and setting routines. Mrs. Johnson would come every morning from 8 to noon, helping with chores and keeping him company. The afternoons and evenings would be Walter's to do as he pleased. And what about the legal matter? Asked Margaret. When will the guardianship be lifted? Dr. Peterson said he's already filed the request. It may take a few weeks, but the doctors have already given their approval. And the money? For now, it stays in our joint account. Once the guardianship is lifted, I'll transfer it to my personal account. What about helping Michael? I'll think about it. First, I want to settle in at home and see how they behave from now on. That first night back home, Walter took a long time to fall asleep. Not from anxiety or worry, but from pure happiness. He was lying in his own bed, in his own room, in his own home. For the first time in months, he slept deeply without being woken by the noises of other residents or staff making nighttime rounds. The next morning, he awoke to the sound of birds in the garden. It was a sound he hadn't heard in a long time, and it brought him an immense sense of peace. Mrs. Johnson arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. Good morning, Mr. Walter. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months, he replied with a smile. That's wonderful. What would you like to do today? I want to walk around the neighborhood, greet the neighbors, maybe go to the market. I can come with you if you'd like. For now, I'll go alone. But thank you. The walk through the neighborhood was emotional. Several neighbors he hadn't seen in months came to greet him and ask how he was doing. Some knew he had been at the retirement home, others didn't. Walter, it's so good to see you back, said Mr. Simmons from the corner store. Hi, Michael. I missed talking to you. Where have you been? It's been a while since you've been around. I had some health issues and needed to stay somewhere they could take better care of me. But you're doing well now? Now I'm great. At the market, he bought a few basic items to restock the house. It was a simple task, but it meant a lot to him, the ability to make his own choices about what to eat and when. Back home, he had lunch peacefully while listening to classical music. It was a luxury he didn't have at the retirement home, where there was always noise from other people. In the afternoon, he got a call from Michael. Dad, how was your first night at home? Wonderful, I slept better than I have in a long time. That's great. Do you need anything? Not for now. Mrs. Johnson is helping me with what I need. Dad, I wanted to invite you to dinner with us tomorrow. Jennifer is cooking. That would be wonderful. It's been a while since we've had dinner together. 7 o'clock. Perfect. The call from Michael left him hopeful about the possibility of rebuilding their family relationship. Maybe everything they'd been through could have a positive ending. Over the next week, Walter settled into a comfortable routine. He woke up early, had coffee with Mrs. Johnson, did some light physical activity in the garden, had lunch, rested in the afternoon, and spent his evenings reading or watching television. Margaret visited him twice a week, and he received regular calls from George and a few other friends from the retirement home. "How's the adjustment going?" asked Dr. Anderson during a follow-up appointment. "Perfect. I haven't had any memory issues or confusion. And emotionally, I feel like a person again. Having control over my own life has made a huge difference." "That's great. And your relationship with your family?" "Gradually improving. I had dinner at Michael's place twice this week." "Wonderful. Any difficulties or concerns?" "None. I'm very happy with my decision to come home." 2 weeks after returning home, Walter received the news he'd been waiting for. Dr. Peterson called to inform him that the guardianship had been officially reversed. "Congratulations, Walter. You've regained full legal rights over your life." "Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Without your help, this wouldn't have been possible." "It was my pleasure. People like you deserve to have their dignity respected." "Doctor, I'd like to talk about how I can help others going through the same situation." "What kind of help do you have in mind?" "Maybe paying for independent medical evaluations or hiring lawyers for cases like mine." "That's a very noble idea. We can discuss the best ways to make it happen." With the guardianship reversed, Walter was able to transfer his money back to a personal account. He also began thinking seriously about how to use part of his fortune to help other seniors. "Margaret, I want to create some kind of fund to help people who are wrongfully institutionalized," he said during one of his visits. "How would it work?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe by paying for medical evaluations or lawyers or caregivers for those who want to return home." "That's a wonderful idea. Would you help me organize it?" "Of course. It would be an honor." They began researching how to establish a small local assistance fund. Dr. Peterson offered to help with the legal aspects, and Dr. Anderson said he could refer cases in need of support. 3 months after returning home, Walter had established the Dignity Fund using his own resources to help seniors obtain second medical opinions and legal support when needed. The first case they assisted was Mrs. Thompson's, who got an independent evaluation and discovered she could also live more independently. "Walter, I don't know how to thank you," she said, when she was able to return home with a caregiver's support. "You don't have to thank me. That's what friends do for each other." His relationship with Michael and Jennifer also continued to improve. They managed to resolve their financial problems without Walter's help, showing they had truly learned to take responsibility for their own lives. "Dad, I'm proud of the person you are," Michael said during a family dinner. "Can you forgive me for doubting your abilities?" "Michael, we all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. And about the money you mentioned, do you still want to help us?" "I'll think about it. First, I want to see how you do on your own." "That's fair." A year after leaving the retirement home, Walter was taking his morning walk through the neighborhood when he ran into Dr. Anderson at the bakery. "Mr. Johnson, so good to see you. How are you?" "Very well, doctor, and you?" "Great. I wanted to tell you the project you inspired is going very well." "What project?" "We're systematically re-evaluating all the residents at the retirement home. We've already helped 12 people return home with proper support." "That's wonderful. And your fund has helped 15 families get second medical opinions. I'm so happy to contribute. You've proven that age isn't synonymous with incapacity and that everyone deserves to have their autonomy respected." That afternoon, Walter was in his garden watering the plants when he got a surprise visit. George. "George, what a lovely surprise. Hi, my friend, I came to share some news." "What news?" "I passed the evaluation and I'm going back home too." "Really? That's fantastic. Your example inspired me to fight for my independence. When are you leaving the retirement home?" "Next week, and guess who's going to be my support neighbor?" "Who?" "You. I rented the house at the end of the street." Walter was moved to hear that his best friend from the retirement home would be living nearby. "George, that's the best news I could have gotten. We can support each other." Of course we can." That evening, Walter sat in his favorite armchair by the fireplace, where months earlier he had considered burning all his money. Now, instead of money, the papers of his guardianship were burning, brought by Dr. Peterson as a symbol of the end of that difficult chapter in his life. Margaret sat beside him, watching the flames consume the documents that had limited Walter's freedom for so long. "How does it feel seeing those papers burn?" she asked. "It feels like I'm burning the past to make room for the future," he replied. "And what kind of future do you imagine?" "A future where I can help others reclaim their dignity, where my family respects me as a person, and where I can live each day knowing my choices are my own." "You've achieved all that. We've achieved it. Without your help, I would never have left that retirement home." "Walter, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "If you could go back and avoid everything that happened, would you do it?" Walter thought for a moment before answering. "I'm not sure I would. It was painful, but it taught me so much about myself and what truly matters in life." "What matters most? Dignity, autonomy, and having people who genuinely care about us." "And what about the money? Still thinking about burning it?" Margaret teased. "Never again," Walter laughed. "Now I know money is a tool to build good things, not to destroy." Michael arrived just then, carrying a gift for his father. "Dad, I brought you something," he said, handing over a wrapped package. Walter opened it to find a framed photo of the whole family together during the last Christmas before the Troubles began. "I thought you might like to have this on your nightstand," Michael said. "Thank you, son. I'll treasure it." "Dad, I want you to know I've learned so much from everything we went through." "I have too, Michael. What's the biggest lesson?" "That true family is the one that respects and supports you, even when you grow old and dependent." "And I learned that being a son doesn't give me the right to control my parents' lives," Michael replied. "We're both better people today than we were a year ago," Walter concluded. Jennifer arrived soon after, bringing a dinner she'd prepared specially for the occasion. "Walter, I made your favorite dish," she said. "Thank you." "Jennifer, you didn't have to go to the trouble." "It was no trouble, it was a pleasure." Over dinner, they talked about future plans. Michael and Jennifer had stabilized their finances and were considering expanding their business. Walter was planning to grow the Dignity Fund to help more cases. "Dad, if you need our help with the fund, just ask," Michael offered. "Thank you. Maybe you could assist with the administrative side." "Of course. It's a way to give back for all you've done for us. And I can help with outreach," Jennifer added. "I have contacts in communications." After dinner, when everyone had left, Walter sat alone in the living room, reflecting on all he'd regained: his home, his freedom, his dignity, his family's respect, and the chance to help others. The phone rang. It was George. "Walter, sorry to call so late, but I wanted to share something with you." "Go ahead." "I just found out 3 more people from the retirement home were able to return home after their evaluations." "That's wonderful." "One was Mrs. Wilson, who everyone thought couldn't live alone anymore." "How is she?" "Thriving. She has a part-time caregiver and is doing great." "George, I think we've started a quiet revolution." "How so?" "We're proving age isn't a disease, and everyone deserves to have their autonomy respected, as long as it's possible." "True. And the best part is we're doing it one case at a time, one person at a time." After hanging up, Walter walked to the living room window and looked out at his quiet street. In one house lived Margaret, his loyal friend and partner. In another, George would soon move in. It felt good to have a support network so close. He glanced at the wall clock, 10:30 p.m. At the retirement home, lights would be out and everyone forced to sleep. Here he could sleep and wake whenever he chose. He decided to stay up a little longer, reading a book he'd bought that morning. A simple luxury, but one that symbolized his reclaimed freedom. Before heading to bed, he stopped in the kitchen for a glass of water. On the fridge was a note from Mrs. Johnson. "Mr. Walter, I made your favorite lunch for tomorrow. I'm so happy to work for such a special person. Rosa." The note moved him deeply. It felt good to know that the people around him valued him as a person, not just as someone who needed care. In his room before bed, he looked at the photo Michael had brought him. It was a picture of simpler times, when the family was together and happy. Now, after everything they'd been through, maybe they could be happy again, just in a more mature and respectful way. He picked up his phone and sent Michael a message. "Thank you for the photo and for everything you did today. I love you." The reply came quickly. "We love you too, Dad. Good night." He lay in bed with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He had his home, his independence, his family, his friends, and the means to help others. It was more than many people have at 75, but most important of all was the feeling that his choices were his own. He could decide what to eat, when to sleep, where to go, and who to talk to. It was the basic freedom every human being deserves, no matter their age. Before falling asleep, he reflected on everything he'd learned over the past few months. First, that true family is the one that respects you, even as you age and become more dependent. Second, that having financial resources is important, but using them to help others brings far more satisfaction than keeping them for yourself. Third, that it's never too late to fight for your rights. Fourth, that genuine friendships can be found in the most unexpected places. Fifth, that dignity has no age and everyone deserves to be treated with respect. The next morning he woke up early with an idea. He called Dr. Peterson. "Doctor, I have a proposal." "Go ahead." "I want to expand the Dignity Fund. Instead of just covering medical evaluations, I want to help people return home with the proper support." "How would that work?" "By paying for home modifications, caregivers, medical alert systems, whatever they need to live safely." "That's an ambitious idea. I have the means to do it, and I want to make a difference in more people's lives." "How much are you thinking of investing?" "Half of my savings, $175,000. "Walter, are you sure? That's a lot of money." "Doctor, what's the point of having money if I can't use it for important things?" "I'll prepare the paperwork to expand the fund." "Thank you." Over the next few months, the Dignity Fund helped 32 people leave nursing homes and return to their own homes. Some needed physical modifications to their houses, others required caregivers, and some just needed emotional support and medical follow-ups. Each case was a small but meaningful victory. Every person who regained their independence proved that age is not synonymous with incapacity. Michael and Jennifer became actively involved in the project, helping with administration and outreach. It was a way for them to channel their energy into something positive and make up for the harm they'd done to Walter. "Dad, working with the fund has taught me so much about seniors' rights," Michael said during lunch one day. "What surprised you the most? How many people are in nursing homes unnecessarily, just because families don't know there are alternatives?" "That's true. Often institutionalization is seen as the only option. And sometimes it's the easiest choice for the family, not necessarily the best for the person." "You learned that the hard way." "Unfortunately, yes. But at least now, I can use that experience to help other families avoid the same mistake." 6 months after expanding the Dignity Fund, Walter got an unexpected call. "Hello, Mr. Johnson. This is Sarah Miller, a journalist from the local paper. We'd like to do a story about your work with seniors." "What kind of story?" "A story about how a man who was unjustly institutionalized created a fund to help others in the same situation. I'm not sure I want public exposure. It would be a way to promote the work and help more people." Walter discussed the proposal with Margaret and Dr. William Peterson. "I think it's worth it," said Margaret. "It could inspire others to start similar projects." "And it could help families learn about their rights," added Dr. Peterson. "All right, but I want the story to focus on the project, not my personal history." The article was published 2 weeks later under the title, "75-Year-Old Man Creates Fund to Restore Dignity to Seniors." The response was greater than they expected. Many people reached out offering donations to the fund. Others wanted to start similar initiatives in their cities. Some families sought help to reassess their elderly loved ones' situations. "Walter, you've become a senior rights activist," George joked during one of their morning walks. "I never thought this would happen at 75. Better late than never." "True, and it's good to know I can make a difference in people's lives." A year after the article, the Dignity Fund had helped over 100 people. Walter decided it was time for one more important step, fully reconciling with Michael. "Son, I need to tell you something," he said during a family dinner. "Go ahead, Dad." "I completely forgive you for everything that happened, and I want you to forgive yourself too." "Dad, let me finish. What's done is done. What matters is the man you've become and the family we are today." Thank you, Dad. That means everything to me. And there's one more thing." "What?" "I want to officially name you as my heir, On one condition. What condition? That you continue the Dignity Fund's work when I'm gone. Of course, Dad. It would be an honor. I want Margaret to be a co-heir. Half goes to you, half to her. Dad, are you sure? Absolutely. Margaret deserves it for everything she's done for me. I couldn't agree more. 2 years after leaving the retirement home, Walter sat in his study reading thank you letters from people the Dignity Fund had helped. One was from an 80-year-old woman who had returned home after 3 years in a facility. Mr. Johnson, I don't know how to thank you. Thanks to your fund, I got a medical evaluation showing I could live independently with support. Now I'm back in my home, with my belongings, my memories, and my freedom. You gave me my life back. Thank you. Another letter came from a son who had reversed his father's institutionalization. Mr. Johnson, your story opened my eyes. I realized I was doing to my father what others had done to you. I got him out of the home, and now he lives with me. Our relationship has never been better. Thank you for teaching me that caring doesn't mean controlling. Each letter confirmed his decision to use his money to help others had been right. Margaret walked in with tea and cookies. Reading the letters again, they always move me, seeing how we've changed so many lives. Walter, can I ask you something? Of course. Ned, if you could give one piece of advice to other seniors facing what you went through, what would it be? Never stop fighting for your rights. No matter how hard it seems, there's always a way to reclaim your dignity. And for families, to remember their elders are people, not problems to solve. Aging doesn't automatically mean losing the ability to make decisions. And for healthcare professionals, to evaluate each case individually, without age-based biases. And may they remember that dignity and autonomy are fundamental rights of every human being. That evening, Walter was in his garden gazing at the stars when his phone rang. It was a call from New York City. Hello? Mr. Johnson, this is Dr. Richard Brown, a geriatrician at General Hospital. I've heard about your work and would like to invite you to give a talk on seniors' rights. A talk? Yes, for doctors and healthcare professionals. We'd like you to share your experience and teach them the importance of evaluating each case individually. Doctor, I've never spoken in public before. I'm not sure I'm the right person. On the contrary, your story carries far more impact than any academic theory. Professionals need to hear the patient's perspective. Walter hesitated for a moment. The idea of speaking to an audience of doctors intimidated him, but it also excited him. When would this talk be? In 3 weeks. It's a conference on geriatrics and seniors' rights. Can I think about it? Of course, but I hope you'll accept. Your contribution would be invaluable. After hanging up, Walter discussed the invitation with Margaret. I think you should accept, she said. But I've never spoken to doctors. What if I can't answer their questions? Walter, you've lived through everything they study in textbooks. Your experience is worth more than any degree. What if I freeze up while speaking? Then you take a deep breath and remember why you're there, to help other seniors avoid what you went through. You're right. I'll accept. Can I come with you to support you? I'd love that. Walter called Dr. Brown back and accepted the invitation. Over the next 3 weeks, he prepared intensely for the talk, organizing his story in a clear and impactful way. Michael also offered to help. Dad, can I help you prepare the presentation slides? You'd do that? Of course. It's the least I can do. Michael, there's something I want to include in the presentation. What? Your perspective as a son. What you've learned from all this. You think that's important? I do. Doctors need to understand that families suffer too when wrong decisions are made. All right, I'll prepare a section on that. On the day of the talk, Walter woke up nervous. It was the first time he'd speak to an audience of over 200 people, mostly doctors and healthcare professionals. How are you feeling? Margaret asked during breakfast. Nervous but determined. If my story can help even one senior, it'll be worth it. It'll go well. You have an important message to share. Michael arrived to accompany them to New York City. Dad, I brought a printed copy of the presentation in case you need to refer to it. Thank you, son. And Dad, yes? I'm proud of you. Few men your age would have the courage to do what you're doing. During the trip, Walter mentally rehearsed his speech. He wanted to tell his story in a way that would touch the professionals' hearts while also providing practical insights. At the hospital, they were greeted by Dr. Brown, a man around 60 with graying hair and a warm smile. "Mr. Johnson, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I read the article about your work and was deeply impressed." "Thank you, Doctor. I hope I can contribute in some way." "I'm certain you will. I've already heard from many colleagues, eager to hear your talk." "How many people will be there?" "About 300, doctors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, all from geriatric care." The number made Walter even more nervous, but he took a deep breath and focused on his goal, helping other seniors. The auditorium was packed when it was time for his presentation. Walter stepped onto the stage, accompanied by Margaret and Michael, who had been invited to participate. "Good afternoon, everyone," began Dr. Richard Brown. "It's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Walter Johnson, who will share with us a very important experience about dignity and the rights of seniors." Walter approached the microphone, looked at the audience, and began, "My name is Walter Johnson. I'm 77 years old, and 2 years ago, I was placed in a retirement home against my will because my son thought I could no longer take care of myself." A respectful silence filled the auditorium. "Today, I'm not here to blame anyone, but to share how I proved I still had the capacity to make my own decisions, and how that changed not just my life, but the lives of over 100 other seniors." For the next 40 minutes, Walter recounted his story in detail: the forced admission, the feeling of lost dignity, the neuropsychological exams, the legal battle, and finally, the reclaiming of his freedom. "The issue wasn't whether I had memory problems or not," he explained. "The issue was that no one talked to me about my options. No one asked what I wanted. They simply decided that institutionalization was the best solution." Many professionals in the audience took vigorous notes. "I discovered there are alternatives for almost every situation. In-home caregivers, day centers, home modifications, support systems. But these alternatives only work if the person wants them and if the family supports them." Michael stepped up to the microphone to share his perspective. "As a son, I can admit I made serious mistakes," he said. "I thought I knew what was best for my father without truly listening to him. I thought institutionalization was love and care, when in reality it was disrespect and impatience." "And when did you realize your mistake?" asked a doctor in the audience. "When I saw my father emotionally withering in the retirement home, when I realized he was losing his will to live not because of illness, but because he had lost his autonomy." Margaret was also invited to speak. "As a neighbor and friend, I saw firsthand how the admission affected Walter. He wasn't physically ill, he was sick with sadness and abandonment." "And how did you reverse the situation?" asked a psychologist. "With comprehensive medical evaluations, legal support, and above all, patience to understand that every case is unique," Margaret replied. After the formal presentation, the floor opened for questions. The inquiries were varied and profound. "Mr. Johnson, how do you distinguish between genuine care and control disguised as love?" asked a nurse. "By asking the person what they want and respecting that choice, even if it's different from what you think is best," Walter answered. "But what if the person truly lacks the capacity to decide?" pressed a doctor. "Then you offer support for the decision. You don't make it for them. Explain the options, help them understand the consequences, but leave the final choice to them." "Mr. Johnson, what was the hardest moment in this entire process?" asked a social worker. "It was when I started doubting myself, when I wondered if Michael might be right, that I really couldn't live on my own anymore." "And how did you overcome that doubt?" "With the help of people who believed in me and gave me the chance to prove my capabilities." The questions continued for another hour. Each of Walter's answers offered a fresh perspective to the professionals present. "Mr. Johnson, what advice would you give a doctor evaluating whether a senior should be institutionalized?" came the final question. "Talk to the person, not just the family. Assess the actual needs, not just theoretical risks. And remember, dignity and autonomy are also matters of health." At the end of the lecture, Walter received a standing ovation from the entire audience. Several professionals approached to thank him and ask for more information about the Dignity Fund. "Mr. Johnson, your lecture was the most impactful I've ever attended," said a geriatric doctor. "It made me completely rethink my approach to elderly patients. I'm glad I could contribute," Walter replied, moved by the reception. Dr. Richard Brown approached him afterward. "Mr. Johnson, I'd like to invite you to speak at other events. Your message needs to be heard by more professionals." "Doctor, I'll accept any invitation that can help other seniors." "Perfect. I'll organize a speaking schedule for the coming months." On the way home, Walter was beaming. "How do you feel after the lecture?" Margaret asked. "I feel like I've found a new purpose in life," he answered. "I never imagined my painful experience could turn into something so positive." "Dad, you were inspiring," Michael said. "I'm sure many professionals will change how they work after today." "I hope so. If we can prevent other families from going through what we did, it will all be worth it." In the following weeks, Walter received several invitations to speak in other cities. Each presentation was an opportunity to raise awareness among professionals about respecting seniors' autonomy. But not everything was easy. The Dignity Fund was growing quickly, and Walter was struggling to manage all the cases. "Margaret, we're getting more requests for help than we can handle," he said during a meeting. "How many new cases do we have?" "This month? 43, but we've only been able to assess 20. We need more volunteers. And more funding too. My personal savings are almost gone." The fund's financial situation was becoming worrisome. Walter had donated most of his savings, and third-party donations weren't enough to meet the growing demand. "Dad, can I suggest something?" Michael said during dinner. "Of course. What if we turn the fund into a larger organization with professional fundraising?" "How do you mean?" "A formal non-profit with a dedicated team and the ability to receive larger donations. But wouldn't that make it too big?" "Not necessarily. It could stay focused on the region but with better structure." The idea was tempting, but Walter was afraid of losing control over the project he had created. "What if the organization takes a direction I don't agree with?" "That's why you need to structure everything carefully from the start," Margaret suggested. "Define the mission, the values, and create a board with trusted people." "Who would be on this board?" "You, me, Michael, Dr. Peterson, Dr. Anderson, and some of the people the fund has helped." The idea started making sense to Walter. He spoke with Dr. Peterson about the legal feasibility. "It's entirely possible," the lawyer said, "and it would be a way to ensure your work continues." "How long would it take to organize everything?" "About 3 months for all the legal paperwork." "And would I still have a say in decisions?" "Yes, you'd be the founding president, with veto power on major decisions." Walter decided to move forward with formalizing the nonprofit. Over the next few months, he worked intensely on structuring the organization, which was named the Dignity and Autonomy Institute. But in the middle of this process, he received news that shook his plans. Dr. Anderson called to say they needed to talk urgently. "Mr. Johnson, I have something important to tell you." "What happened, Doctor?" "There's an investigation at the retirement home where you stayed. Some family members are questioning whether some admissions were unnecessary." "What kind of investigation?" "The district attorney's office is reviewing cases of elderly people who were institutionalized without proper medical evaluation." "And how does this affect me?" "You might be called to testify, since your case was one that drew attention." The possibility of having to relive his entire experience in a legal proceeding left Walter worried. "Doctor, would I be forced to testify?" "Not forced, but your contribution would be very valuable in helping other cases." "I need to think about this." Walter discussed the situation with his family. Michael was visibly uncomfortable. "Dad, if you testify, you'll publicly expose everything that happened between us." "And does that bother you?" "It bothers me because it could affect my professional reputation." "Michael, are you thinking about yourself or the people who could be helped?" "I'm thinking about both." "Son, everything we went through is already public knowledge through the talks and news reports. Testifying in an investigation would just formalize what I've already shared many times." "Dad, I support whatever decision you make," said Jennifer. "But Michael is right to worry about the professional consequences." What kind of consequences? If you testify that Michael institutionalized you for financial gain, it could hurt his credibility at the real estate agency. Jennifer's observation gave Walter pause. He had forgiven Michael and didn't want to harm him professionally, but he also didn't want to miss the chance to help other seniors. Michael, would you prefer I didn't testify? I'd prefer you do what you think is right, Dad. I'll handle the consequences. Are you sure? I am. I've learned that trying to hide the truth only makes things worse. Walter decided to testify in the investigation. His participation helped identify several cases of questionable institutionalization, leading to policy changes at the Sunshine Retirement Home. But the public exposure brought unexpected fallout. Michael began facing professional difficulties, with some clients canceling deals because they believed he had mistreated his own father. Dad, I'm not blaming you, but the situation is complicated, Michael said during a tense dinner. What exactly is happening? I lost 3 important clients this week. They said they don't trust someone who would institutionalize his own father for money. But that's been resolved. You regretted it and changed. People only hear what they want. No one cares about the reconciliation. Jennifer looked concerned. Walter, maybe it would help to make a public statement clarifying that you've reconciled. What kind of statement? Just an interview or an open letter, explaining that Michael acknowledged his mistakes and completely changed. The suggestion made sense to Walter. He didn't want his son to suffer lasting professional consequences over something they had already forgiven and moved past. Michael, would you like me to do that? I would, Dad, but only if you truly want to, not because I pressured you. Of course I want to. You're my son, and I won't let you suffer unnecessarily. Walter reached out to the journalist who had first covered the Dignity Fund and proposed a follow-up story focused on their family reconciliation. Mr. Johnson, this would be a very compelling angle, said Sarah Miller. It would show that even serious family conflicts can be overcome. Exactly. And it would prove people can change and grow. The second article was published under the headline, Father and Son Reconcile After Conflict That Led to Social Project. The piece highlighted Michael's transformation and Walter's capacity for forgiveness. My son made mistakes, just like we all do, Walter said in the interview. But he had the courage to admit them, apologize, and change. That matters more than any past errors. Michael was also interviewed. I've learned that caring for someone we love doesn't mean controlling them. I learned that my father deserves respect and autonomy, no matter his age. The response to the second report was very positive. Several clients who had distanced themselves from Michael came back to seek his services, and he received praise for having the courage to publicly admit his mistakes. Dad, thank you for defending me publicly, Michael said, moved. I didn't defend you, son. I just told the truth about who you are today. And who am I today? A man who learned from his mistakes and became a better person. A son who cares for his father without trying to control him. With the family situation stabilized, Walter could focus again on the Dignity and Autonomy Institute. The organization was officially established and beginning operations in its new headquarters. Margaret, we did it, he said on the day of the inauguration. We went from an improvised fund to a professional organization. And the best part is, we never lost sight of what really matters: the people. The inauguration ceremony was attended by local officials, healthcare professionals, families who had been helped, and seniors who had been able to return home through the Institute. Mr. Johnson, on behalf of the city, I want to congratulate you on this extraordinary work, said the Municipal Health Secretary. Thank you, Secretary. I hope we can work together to improve the quality of life for seniors in our city. We're available for any partnership. During the ceremony, a surprise moved Walter deeply. George stepped onto the stage to give a speech. My friend Walter doesn't know this, but I prepared a few words about him, George began. I met Walter at the retirement home during the worst moments of his life. I saw a man broken by the loss of his freedom, but who never lost his dignity. The room fell completely silent. Walter taught me that age doesn't define our ability to fight for what's right. He inspired me to seek my own freedom, and now through the Institute he's inspiring hundreds of others. George, you didn't have to, Walter started to say, emotional. Yes, I did, my friend, because you saved my life too. And I want everyone to know that. George's words brought tears to many in the audience, including Walter. After the ceremony, several people approached to share their personal stories and thank the Institute for its work. Mr. Johnson, my mother was able to return home thanks to the Institute, said a woman in her 50s. She was fading away in the retirement home and now she's happy again. That's wonderful to hear, Walter replied. How is she adjusting? Wonderfully. She has a caregiver for a few hours a day and is participating in community activities. And you? How do you feel as a daughter? Guilty for taking so long to realize that institutionalization wasn't the only option, but grateful that there's still time to make things right. Stories like this repeated themselves constantly. Every person who approached Walter had a tale of transformation, overcoming hardship, or family reconciliation. But not all the news was positive. During the first meeting of the Institute's board, Dr. Peterson raised an important concern. Walter, we need to talk about financial sustainability, the lawyer said. What's the issue? We're growing too fast. We've already helped over 200 families in a year, but donations aren't keeping up with the growth. How much do we need to maintain operations? At least $20,000 a month to cover all costs. And how much are we raising? About $12,000 a month. The difference of $8,000 a month was significant and worrying. What options do we have? Margaret asked. We can seek corporate sponsorships, government partnerships, or reduce the number of cases we take on, Dr. Peterson explained. Reducing cases is not an option, Walter said firmly. We'll look for other alternatives. Michael spoke up. Dad, I can help with fundraising. I have contacts in the business world. You'd do that? Of course, it's a way to give back for everything you've done. And I can help with communications, Jennifer offered. We can create a marketing campaign to attract more donors. The family coming together to support the Institute moved Walter deeply. Thank you. With your help, I'm sure we'll solve the financial issue. Over the following months, Michael and Jennifer worked tirelessly to secure new sponsors. They visited companies, organized fundraising events, and launched a digital marketing campaign. Dad, we have good news, Michael said during a family meeting. What good news? We got 3 corporate sponsors who will donate $15,000 a month for a year. Really? How did you manage that? We presented the project to the business owners and showed them the social impact. They were impressed by the results. And there's more, Jennifer added. The digital campaign brought in over 200 new monthly donors. With the new resources, the Institute expanded its programs. They created home visits for assessments, workshops for families, and a mediation service to resolve conflicts. Margaret, we've built something far beyond what we imagined at the start, Walter said during a walk in the park. It's true, and the most beautiful part is seeing how your personal experience turned into something that helps so many people. Sometimes I think everything I went through was necessary to get here. Maybe it was. Sometimes we need to face hardships to discover our true purpose. And what do you think my true purpose is? To show the world that aging doesn't mean losing dignity, and to teach families how to care for the elderly with love and respect. Their conversation was interrupted by a call on Walter's phone. It was Dr. Brown, the geriatrician, who had organized his first lecture. Mr. Johnson, I have a very special proposal for you. What proposal, Doctor? We'd like to invite you to write a book about your experience. A book? Yes. Your story deserves to be preserved and shared widely. I've already spoken to a publisher interested in the project. The idea of writing a book had never crossed Walter's mind. Doctor, I've never written anything professionally. I'm not sure I'd be capable. You'd have help from a professional writer. It would be like an assisted biography. I need to think about it, of course. But consider that a book could reach thousands who've never heard your story. Walter discussed the book proposal with his family. I think you should do it, Dad, Michael said. Your story deserves to be preserved. And a book could generate income for the Institute through royalties, Jennifer added. Do you think people would really want to read my story? Dad, your story is about something that will happen to all of us. Aging, Michael replied. Everyone needs to hear about it. Margaret also supported the idea. Walter, imagine how many families could avoid the same mistakes if they read your story. Convinced by his family's arguments, Walter agreed to write the book. The writing process took 8 months, with weekly sessions alongside the co-writer. Mr. Johnson, let's start at the beginning, the writer said in their first session. What was your life like before everything happened? It was simple and happy. I worked as a construction worker, had my home, my wife, my son. I never imagined I'd go through what I did. And when did the first problems begin? After my wife passed away. I felt very alone, and Michael began to worry excessively about me. During the writing sessions, Walter relived his entire story in detail. Some memories were painful, others were moving, but they all contributed to an honest and complete account. The hardest part to write was about the first days at the retirement home, he told Margaret, remembering that feeling of abandonment and humiliation. And the easiest part, talking about our friendship and how you helped me. That part I wrote with a heart full of gratitude. The book was finished at the beginning of the 3rd year after Walter left the retirement home. The chosen title was Dignity Has No Age, the story of a man who reclaimed his freedom. The launch was an emotional event held at the Institute's headquarters itself. Family members, friends, beneficiaries of the Institute, healthcare professionals, and local authorities were all present. This book isn't just my story, Walter said during the launch speech. It's the story of all seniors who have been disrespected, all families who made mistakes out of misguided love, and all people who found the strength to start over. And what message would you like readers to take away? Asked a journalist in attendance. That it's never too late to fight for your rights, and that caring for someone doesn't mean controlling them. The book received a very positive reception, being recommended by several geriatric professionals and earning glowing reviews in the press. But the success brought an unexpected consequence. Walter began receiving hundreds of letters and emails from people who identified with his story. Margaret, I can't answer all the messages I get, he said, showing stacks of letters on his desk. How many arrive each day? At least 20. Emails are even more. What kind of messages are they? Some are from seniors going through similar situations. Others are from children who recognize their mistakes. Many are from professionals asking for advice. That's wonderful, Walter. It means your story is truly making a difference. But I'm feeling overwhelmed. I want to respond to everyone, but I don't have the time. To solve the problem, the Institute created a specific department to handle the demands generated by the book. A team of volunteers began responding to messages and forwarding the most urgent cases. The book's success also brought invitations to speak in other states. Walter started traveling regularly to share his story at medical conferences, universities, and events on senior rights. Mr. Johnson, your talk changed the way I work, said a doctor after a presentation in Chicago. Now I always speak with the elderly patient before talking to the family. That's good to hear, doctor. That's exactly the kind of change we want to bring about. And can I adapt your ideas for my city? Of course. The more places that have similar projects, the better. 2.5 years after leaving the retirement home, Walter had become a national reference in senior rights. The Institute had already helped over 500 families and inspired the creation of similar projects in 12 cities, but not everything was perfect. The physical toll of traveling and speaking began affecting his health. Walter, you're giving too many talks, Dr. Anderson said during a routine checkup. Your blood pressure is off and you look tired. Doctor, I can't disappoint the people who rely on my talks. Yes, you can. You're 78 years old and need to take care of your health. But the work is too important. The work will continue even if you slow down. The Institute has its own structure now. The doctor's observation made Walter reflect on the need to delegate more responsibilities and reduce his schedule. Margaret, I think Dr. Anderson is right. I need to take better care of myself. You do, Walter. The movement you started doesn't depend on you alone anymore. I know, but it's hard to step back. You're not stepping back. You're making sure the work continues for years to come. With Margaret's encouragement, Walter began training new speakers to represent the Institute. He still gave us talks, but fewer, focusing on the most important events. The rest of his time he dedicated to mentoring and writing. One afternoon, as he sorted through letters at his desk, Walter paused at one in particular. It was from a woman in upstate New York, thanking him for giving her the courage to stand up to her family and reclaim her independence. "Margaret, listen to this," he read aloud. "Your story showed me that dignity has no age. At 75, I moved into my own apartment. My children were against it, but now they see how happy I am. That's what this is all about, Walter. Changing lives. It's more than I ever imagined. You planted the seeds. Now let others help them grow." Walter smiled, folding the letter carefully. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The fight wasn't over, but he wasn't alone in it anymore. And that made all the difference. "Robert is right. I'm wearing myself out too much." "I think so too. You're 78 years old and deserve to enjoy the life you fought so hard to regain. But how can I cut back without hurting the Institute? By training others to give talks, creating educational materials, automating some processes. Do you think Michael and Jennifer could take on more responsibilities in management? I'm sure they could. They've shown great dedication to the project." Walter spoke with Michael about the possibility of taking on more responsibilities. At the Institute, "Dad, it would be an honor to help more actively," said Michael, "but you'd still remain as president and make the major decisions, right?" "Of course. I'd just delegate administrative tasks and some of the talks." "I'd be happy to. And Jennifer can also help with marketing and communications." "Perfect. That way I can focus on the activities I truly enjoy, talking with families and visiting beneficiaries." The transition of responsibilities was gradual and successful. Michael took over the Institute's general administration. Jennifer handled communications, and Walter focused on the activities that brought him the most personal fulfillment. "How does it feel having more time for yourself?" asked George. During one of their morning walks. "Good, but sometimes I feel like I should be doing more." "Walter, you've already done more for seniors' rights than most people do for any cause in their entire lives." "Maybe you're right." "I am, and now it's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor." "What fruits?" "A reconciled family, a thriving institute, hundreds of lives changed, and the knowledge that you made a difference in this world." George's reflection made Walter realize he had truly achieved far more than he'd imagined when he decided not to burn his money that desperate afternoon. On the 3rd anniversary of his leaving the retirement home, the Institute organized a celebration. The event brought together over 300 people, beneficiaries, volunteers, donors, partners, and family members. 3 years ago, I was in a desperate situation, Walter said during his speech. Today I'm surrounded by people who've become part of my extended family. "And what's changed the most in your life these past 3 years?" asked the event's host. "Everything. My relationship with my son, my perspective on aging, my life's purpose. But most of all, my faith in people's capacity for change and growth." During the celebration, several people shared how their lives had been transformed by the Institute's work. "My grandmother was able to return home at 85, said a young woman. "She had given up on life in the retirement home, and now she's joyful again." "My father and I reconciled after attending the Institute's workshops," said a middle-aged man. "I learned to respect him as a person, not just care for him like a child." "The Institute saved me from making the worst decision of my life," confessed a woman. "I was going to place my mother in a home out of convenience, but the talks helped me see there were other options." Each testimony moved Walter and strengthened his conviction that he had found his true life's purpose. But the celebration also brought an unexpected surprise. During the event, a van arrived carrying 15 seniors who had been helped by the Institute. They had organized themselves to thank Walter in person. "Mr. Johnson, we came here to say thank you," said Mrs. Eleanor, an 82-year-old woman who had returned home after 2 years in a retirement home. "You didn't have to go through the trouble," Walter replied, touched. "Yes, we did. You gave us back our dignity when everyone thought we no longer deserved it." One by one, the elderly approached to hug Walter and share how their lives had improved. Some had returned home. Others had secured better conditions in the retirement homes where they stayed, and all had regained their self-esteem and hope. "Mr. Johnson, you've proven it's never too late to start over," said Mr. Franklin, 79 years old. "Your story inspired me to fight for my rights too." "And did you get what you wanted, Mr. Franklin?" "I managed to go back home, have my caregiver, and most importantly, have my family respect me again. That's what matters most." The evening ended with everyone singing "Happy Birthday" to Walter, not for his birthday, but to celebrate how he had turned his personal pain into hope for hundreds of others. In the days following the celebration, Walter reflected on everything he had achieved. 3 years earlier, he had been so desperate he considered burning his entire fortune. Now, he had created a legacy that would continue helping people long after he was gone. "Margaret, sometimes I wonder if all this really happened," he said over afternoon coffee. "Why do you say that?" "Because it feels surreal how my life completely changed in 3 years. It didn't change by accident, Walter. It changed because you had the courage to fight for your rights and the wisdom to turn your experience into something positive. And do you think I made the right choice using my money to help others? I'm absolutely certain. You could have used it to live comfortably, but you chose to use it to transform lives. That's far more valuable than any material comfort. And you don't regret helping me? Your life changed a lot because of it too." "My life changed for the better, Walter. I found a purpose I didn't have before. I feel useful and happy. We make a good team, don't we?" "The best senior rights activist duo I know," Margaret laughed. That same month, Walter received a call that moved him deeply. It was from the producers of a national television program who wanted to make a documentary about his story. "Mr. Johnson, we're from the production team of Life Stories on the national network. We'd like to make an hour-long documentary about your journey." "A documentary?" "Yes. Your story has all the elements of a great narrative. Overcoming adversity, family reconciliation, positive social impact. But my story has already been told in the book and in several articles. A documentary has a much wider reach. It could introduce millions of people to your work who've never heard of it." The prospect of reaching millions was tempting, but Walter had concerns about national exposure. "I need to talk to my family before deciding." "Of course. But we hope you'll accept. Stories like yours inspire the whole country." During a family dinner, Walter presented the documentary proposal. "Dad, I think you should do it," said Michael. "Your message needs to reach as many people as possible. But a national documentary will expose our family to the entire country." "Dad, our story is already public, and we're proud of how we've grown and changed. Jennifer, do you also think I should accept?" "I do, and I can help with production to make sure your message is conveyed correctly. What about you, Margaret?" "I think it would be selfish to keep your story just for our area. Millions of families across the country could benefit from your experience." Convinced by his family's arguments, Walter agreed to participate. Filming lasted 3 months, including interviews, reenactments, and testimonials from people impacted by his work. "Mr. Johnson, could you speak directly to the camera as if you were talking to a child considering placing their father in a home?" asked the director during one of the recordings. Walter looked straight into the camera and said, "Son, before making this decision, sit down and talk to your father. Ask him what he wants, what his fears are, how he'd like to be cared. For remember, he's a person with feelings, not a problem to be solved. And remember that one day you'll grow old too, and you'll want to be treated with respect and dignity." The recording moved the entire production team. The documentary aired on a Friday night and had exceptional viewership. The next morning, the Institute received over 2,000 calls from people seeking help or offering support. "Walter, your phone hasn't stopped ringing," said Margaret, amazed by the response. "And it's not just mine. The Institute got more calls today than it usually gets in a whole month." "That's wonderful, but also worrying. How will we handle all this demand? We need to expand quickly or help people create similar institutes in other cities." The national attention from the documentary brought unexpected opportunities. Several companies offered sponsorships, universities invited Walter to give talks, and politicians approached the Institute to discuss public policies for the elderly. "Mr. Johnson, I'm a state representative and would like to propose a law based on your institute's work, said a politician during a visit. What kind of law? A law requiring independent medical evaluation before any senior is institutionalized, guaranteeing the right to a second opinion. Would this be a state law? Initially, yes, but we could try to expand it nationally. The possibility of influencing public policy was something Walter had never imagined, but it could benefit millions of seniors. Representative, I fully support this initiative. You can count on our collaboration. Perfect. I'll need the Institute's help drafting the law. Dr. Peterson was tasked with overseeing the legislative process, while Walter focused on giving testimonies and technical input. Walter, do you realize you're about to influence a state law? Said Margaret during a walk. I still can't quite believe it. 4 years ago, I was just a retired old man living alone. And now you're a national figure in senior rights. It's surreal. But the responsibility scares me too. Why does it scare you? Because millions of people could be affected by this law. If something goes wrong, it'll be partly my fault. Walter, you've already proven your ideas. Work. You've helped hundreds directly and inspired thousands through your book and documentary. True, and if this law helps even one family avoid the mistakes we made, it'll be worth it. The law passed 6 months later, establishing new protocols for senior institutionalization in the state. It was the first law in the country to specifically guarantee the right to a second medical opinion in cases of guardianship. Dad, you've made history, said Michael on the day the law was signed. How many people can say they influenced major legal change? Michael, this was only possible because we had the courage to admit our mistakes and work together to fix them. What makes you proudest in all this? The fact that our family came out stronger from a crisis that could have destroyed us. On the 4th anniversary of his leaving Sunshine Retirement Home, Walter reflected on everything he'd achieved. The Dignity and Autonomy Institute had helped over 1,000 families. His book had sold more than 50,000 copies. The documentary had been seen by over 5 million people. The law he helped shape was benefiting seniors across the state. His family was reconciled and united around a common purpose. He had fully regained his autonomy and dignity. But more important than any number or recognition, Walter had found peace with himself and his role in the world. George, do you think everything we went through was worth it? He asked during one of their morning walks. Walter, our experience at the retirement home was painful, but it brought us here. If we hadn't gone through that, you never would have discovered your calling to help other seniors. That's true. Sometimes suffering is necessary for us to find our true purpose. And what do you think our true purpose is? To prove that age is just a number, and that dignity and respect are rights that never expire. Have we managed to prove that? I think so, and the best part is we've started a movement that will keep proving it long after we're gone. That afternoon, Walter was in his garden, watering the plants Margaret had helped care for during his time at the retirement home. It was a simple activity, but it represented his reclaimed freedom and his ability to care for himself. Michael came by for a visit, bringing news about the Institute. Dad, we have some important updates about the Institute's expansion. What updates? 3 cities have already reached out wanting to open local branches. And do we have the resources to help them? We're developing an operations manual and a training program to replicate our model. Perfect. It's always been my dream for this work to spread to other regions. And there's more. A university wants to create a course on seniors' rights based on our experience. Really? Yes. It would be an extension course for healthcare professionals, social workers and family members. Michael, this is incredible. It means our experience will become formal knowledge. Exactly. And you'd be invited to give lectures for the course. The prospect of contributing to the education of professionals moved Walter deeply. Son, when I think about everything we've achieved together, I feel like the richest man in the world. Why, Dad? Because true wealth isn't about money, it's about purpose, a united family, and the ability to make a difference in people's lives. Dad, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Have you completely forgiven me for what I did? Michael, not only have I forgiven you, but I thank you. How so? If you hadn't placed me in that home, I never would have discovered my calling to help other seniors. Your mistake, as painful as it was, led me to my true life's purpose. I never thought of it that way. Sometimes God uses our mistakes to lead us to the right place. And do you think we're in the right place now? I'm absolutely certain. We're a united family doing important work and growing as people every day. Dad, I want you to know you're my hero. Why? Because you turned the worst experience of your life into the best thing you've ever done. That takes a strength of character I hope to have one day. You already have that strength, Michael. You proved it when you had the courage to admit your mistakes and work to make them right. That night before bed, Walter reflected on his journey. 4 years earlier, he'd been ready to burn all his money in a desperate act of revenge. Now that same money had become a support network benefiting thousands of people. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Margaret. "Thank you for stopping me from burning the money that afternoon. You didn't just save my life, you saved the lives of all the people we've been able to help." The reply came quickly. "Walter, you saved your own life when you decided to fight for your dignity. I just supported you. Good night, my dear friend." Walter smiled and put the phone away. He looked out the bedroom window and saw the full moon lighting up the garden he tended with such care. It was the same garden he had abandoned when he was admitted to the retirement home, but now it represented so much more than a hobby. It stood for his freedom, his autonomy, and his ability to create beautiful things. In the drawer of his nightstand, he kept a photo from the last Institute meeting. In the picture were him, Margaret, Michael, Jennifer, Dr. Peterson, Dr. Anderson, George, and several beneficiaries of the project, all smiling, united by a common cause. It was visual proof that he had managed to turn his pain into purpose, his anger into love, and his despair into hope. He closed his eyes and drifted off peacefully, knowing he had found the true meaning for the last years of his life, restoring dignity to those who had lost hope. The next morning he woke up early and went to the garden to tend to the plants. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and he was expecting Margaret's visit so they could have breakfast together, as they did every weekend. As he watered the roses she had planted, he thought about how surprising life could be. At 79, he had more energy and purpose than he'd had at 60. He had a reconciled family, a true friendship, meaningful work, and the certainty that he had made a difference in the world. Margaret arrived promptly at 9, bringing fresh bread and her usual cheer. "Good morning, my dear friend. How did you sleep?" "Like a baby. And you?" "Wonderfully. So I dreamed the Institute had spread across the whole country. Who knows? Maybe one day that'll come true. I'm sure it will. Good ideas always find a way to spread." Over breakfast, they talked about their plans for the week. Walter had a lecture scheduled at a university, a meeting with new volunteers, and an appointment with families interested in the Institute's services. "Walter, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Margaret." "If you could go back in time and avoid everything that happened, would you?" I've been asked that many times, and my answer is always the same: no. Why? Because everything I went through brought me here. It gave me the chance to meet wonderful people like you, to truly reconcile with my son, and to discover that I can still do important things. And what else have you learned from all this? That it's never too late to start over. That true family is the one that supports and respects you. That money only has value when used for good, and that dignity is the most precious thing we have. What advice would you give other seniors going through difficult situations? Never stop fighting for your rights, seek help when you need it, and always remember that age doesn't define ability. And for families, talk to your elders, listen to what they want, and remember that caring doesn't mean controlling. Breakfast was interrupted by a call from Michael. "Dad, sorry to bother you on the weekend, but we have important news." "What news?" "The Institute has been selected for a National Social Innovation Award." "Really?" "Yes, the ceremony is in 2 months in the capital." "Michael, that's incredible." "And Dad?" "Yes, you'll have to give a speech in front of over 1,000 people." 1,000 people? Walter repeated, impressed. Yes, representatives from NGOs, business leaders, politicians, journalists. After hanging up, Walter was silent for a moment. How do you feel knowing you'll receive a national award? Margaret asked. Honored, but also responsible. This award isn't just mine, it belongs to everyone who believed in the project. What will you talk about in your speech? I'll talk about turning painful experiences into something positive, and how small actions can create big changes. Over the next 2 months, Walter prepared intensely for the award ceremony. I'd like to use this opportunity to further promote the cause of seniors' rights. The ceremony was held at a luxurious hotel in the capital, attended by prominent figures from the non-profit sector, business leaders, politicians, and journalists. Mr. Walter Johnson, founder of the Dignity and Autonomy Institute, announced the host. Please come receive the National Social Innovation Award. Walter stepped onto the stage to a warm ovation. As he accepted the trophy, he looked into the audience and saw Margaret, Michael, Jennifer, and several beneficiaries of the Institute who had traveled to attend the ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, he began his speech, this award represents much more than the recognition of our work. It proves it's never too late to start over, and that painful experiences can turn into life's purpose. The audience listened in respectful silence. 5 years ago, I was just a frustrated senior who had lost his freedom. Today, I represent hundreds of families who have found more dignified ways to care for their elderly. The message I want to leave is that we will all grow old one day, and when that day comes, we'll want to be treated with respect, love, and dignity. The Dignity and Autonomy Institute exists to make sure that happens. His speech ended with a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Many people approached him afterward to congratulate him and ask how to replicate the project. Mr. Johnson, I'm from Boston and would like to start a similar institute, said a businesswoman. Can you help us? Of course, our mission is to spread these ideas as far as possible. Do you have support materials? We have a complete manual and offer training for new partners. On the trip back home, Walter was deep in thought. What's on your mind? Asked Margaret. I'm thinking this award marks the end of one chapter and the start of another. How so? Now our responsibility is much greater. We're a national reference, which means thousands of people are counting on us. Does that worry you? A little, but it also motivates me to keep working. Walter, you've already done far more than anyone would in your situation. You should be proud. I am proud, but I don't want to stop. As long as I have health and energy, I'll keep fighting for seniors' rights. And we'll all keep supporting you. When he got home, Walter went straight to the garden, his favorite place for reflection. He sat on the bench he had built with his own hands years earlier and admired the plants he tended with such care. 5 years had passed since that desperate afternoon when he considered burning all his money. Now that same money had sparked a movement benefiting thousands and earning national recognition. His home, which he had nearly lost, remained his, refuge and sanctuary. His relationship with Michael, once shattered by distrust, was now built on mutual respect and shared purpose. His friendship with Margaret had become one of the most precious things in his life. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was George. Walter, I saw the news about the award on TV. Congratulations. Thank you, my friend. How are you? Doing great. And so proud to have a friend who's changed so many lives. George, you changed my life too. If not for our talks, at the retirement home I might not have found the strength to fight. We helped each other. That's what friends do. And how's life at home? Wonderful. It's been 3 years since I left the retirement home, and every day I feel more grateful for my freedom. That's wonderful to hear. Walter, can I ask you something? Of course. When was the moment you realized you'd found your true life's mission? It was when I received the first thank you letter from a family we were able to help. At that moment, I understood that my painful experience could be turned into hope for others. And what's the Institute's next step? We want to create a national support network for seniors' rights and develop a prevention program to avoid unnecessary hospitalizations. What a beautiful ambition. It's a big ambition, but we have a committed team and enough resources to get started. After hanging up the phone, Walter went back inside. It was dinner time, and Margaret had promised to cook his favorite meal to celebrate the award. During dinner, they talked about their future plans for the Institute and their personal lives. "Walter, have you ever thought about writing a second book?" Margaret asked. "About what?" "About everything that happened after the first book. The creation of the Institute, the national impact, the lives changed." "Would it be a continuation of the first story?" "Exactly, it would show how a person can completely reinvent themselves in their golden years." "That's an interesting idea. I'll think about it." "And this time I could help you write it. After all, I've lived through it all by your side." "I'd love to write a book with you, Margaret. It would be the crowning achievement of our partnership." Michael and Jennifer arrived just then, for the family celebration. "Dad, we brought champagne to toast the award," Michael said. "And we also brought a proposal," Jennifer added. "What proposal?" "We want to suggest you write a full autobiography. Your story is too inspiring to be limited to just one book." "Jennifer," Margaret just suggested the same thing. "Then it's a sign we should do it," Margaret said. "But this time I want the whole family to be part of it," Walter said. Michael sharing his perspective as a son, Jennifer talking about how the experience changed our family dynamic, and Margaret narrating the friendship we've built. "It would be a unique book," Michael agreed. "A story told from multiple perspectives. And it could inspire so many families going through similar conflicts," Jennifer added. During the toast, Walter gave a speech to his family. "I want to toast, not just to the award, but to everything we've achieved together. 5 years ago, we were a family torn apart by distrust and misunderstanding. Today, we're a team united by a common purpose. And what do you value most in all of this?" Margaret asked. "I value the fact that we turned our worst crisis into our greatest victory, and that we proved true love includes respect and dignity." "Dad, what do you want people to remember from your story?" Michael asked. "I want them to remember that it's never too late to start over, that true family supports you without controlling you, and that painful experiences can become a life's purpose." "And what legacy do you want to leave?" "I want to leave a world where seniors are respected and where families know how to care with love without losing respect for autonomy." The evening ended with the family united, planning not just the new book, but also the expansion of the Institute and new projects to benefit seniors across the country. Before bed, Walter wrote in his personal journal, "Today I received a national award for the work we've done at the Institute. But the greatest reward I've received in the last 5 years was the chance to completely reinvent myself at 74. I've learned that life can start over as many times as needed, as long as we have the courage to fight for what we believe in." When I considered burning my money in that moment of despair, I was only thinking of my own pain. Today, that same money has become hope for thousands of people. I learned that money is just a tool, and what matters is how we choose to use it. My deepest gratitude is for Margaret, who stopped me from making an irreversible mistake and became my partner in the mission to restore dignity to the elderly, and for the chance to truly reconcile with Michael, not just superficially. At 79, I feel like my life is just beginning. I have plans for the next 10 years, the energy to keep fighting and the certainty that I've found my true purpose." He closed the diary and lay down in bed with a smile on his face. Through the window, he could see the stars in the clear night sky. It was the same sky he'd gazed at when he was at the retirement home, but now it symbolized endless possibilities instead of imprisonment and despair. He fell asleep peacefully, knowing he had turned his life into a story of hope that would continue to inspire people long after he was gone. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your honest thoughts in the comments. Do you think Walter made the right choice by using his money to help other seniors? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like the video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other heartwarming stories.